Hey, Road? Actually, no.
I haven't heard.
Yeah, I think she's coming in at 10:15.
Okay, thank you.
She's coming Zoom?
No, she's coming in person.
She's coming in
Person.
Okay.
Brick and mortar.
That was the plan, at least.
We have Zoom open if she needs it, but.
Everybody want to go out to lunch? Does everybody want to order something?
No preference.
We don't know what time we're going to be done.
You know what a team play like.
Oh, that's what I think so.
Give these to Angie. I don't know.
Oh, my Angie. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know who they'll fit, but
They might fit me.
no, they won't. They won't fit us. I don't think.
I'd like to call the December 8th, 2020 workshop to order. First on the agenda is the budget. Dr. Asplin, did you want to introduce our guests?
Yes, Madam Chair. Good morning. Good morning, board members. The first item today is an update on our budget, and our CFO, Mitzi Corcoran, is here, and Krista Kortner is here as well, and I will turn it over to them.
Good morning, everyone. So we thought we'd kind of start the conversation with what's been happening legislatively and through the emergency orders, and then kind of continue to where we are projecting our current year's results to end up, and then what's happening as far as planning for next budget cycle. So all of you received a copy of this, which I'm sure you already had previously, to our packet of the new emergency order number 7, which emergency order 6 expired at the end of the year, and so this is to continue that. So there are provisions in there as far as a spring education plan that you'll be discussing later in your workshop. But once there's an approved plan, which we anticipate we will receive approval for, then it kicks in other provisions related to our funding. So with emergency order number 6, it provided a hold harmless. So no matter what your student counts were, you were going to receive funding based upon what was approved by the legislature in the General Appropriations Act. So it's 50%. Our funding comes to us 50% with the October survey, 50% with the February survey. This has proven to be a lifesaver for us because we are down large numbers of students. We had a lot of students who chose to kind of redshirt themselves out of kindergarten or choose homeschool options or virtual school options, which provide less funding. So for us, this was great. What ended up happening was it was realized that, well, what do we do with those districts that don't have a reduction in enrollment and actually see an increase in enrollment because they need additional resources to provide for their students? So in emergency order number 7, what it's saying is, which I will tell you, every finance officer in the state, I sit on finance council, was thrilled with this emergency order. It was incredibly generous. It was way more generous than we thought we were going to receive. So what we thought for sure we were going to have to use our actual counts in February, and that's how we would receive our funding. But it's a continuation of, if you are a lower enrollment district, you'll still receive funding based upon your General Appropriations Act. But if you are a growth district, you will receive funding based upon your total student count. So ultimately, in the end, if you take what the total account was, total enrollment that was used to determine the education budget, what you'll do is increase that denominator so that there are now more students overall, even though there aren't technically. So what happens is then you will share equitably as far as the growth in your reductions. So basically it's a proration, which is what happens to us every year. We had a $500,000+ proration last year. So it happens every year when the enrollments come in different than what the state anticipates. Everybody kind of shares in that and you get a reduction. So as a result of that, we've made a adjustment to our revenues of about $1.5 million, thinking that that's what the share will be. But overall, I can't tell you how relieved we were with this emergency order when it came out, in terms of where we think we're going to end up for the current year. And so I'm going to kind of turn it over to Krista, and she's going to kind of give you an update on where we are currently.
Good morning, everybody. So you should have received information regarding the projected actuals of what we think this year's going to end at based upon operations to this point. And there is a spreadsheet that mirrors the spreadsheet that is in the budget book. It starts with estimated revenues and federal resources, and it's 3 pages. That's what I'm going to be referring to, if you have that. So at the beginning of that page in state sources, the variance budget column on the far right indicates, as Mitzi had said, that our estimate of what we think our reduction in revenue based upon the executive order number 7 will be for us is the 1.5 million, and we are very happy that it's not anymore. As you know, our enrollment is down, so obviously this helps us as far as what our budget was built upon. The next part in the state sources that's changed is that we've also seen not as many students participating in the McKay or Florida Family Empowerment as we had originally projected would. So that's normally comes out of our revenue sources as a deduction, and the state just automatically does that. So because there's not as many students that were reported in the FTE survey preliminary that we have so far, we've increased the deduction that was going to happen by 800,000 roughly. So that's pretty much the only changes that we're anticipating in revenue at this point in time. We're still, of course, watching everything, with our childcare fees and things such as that. And at this point, we don't have any major changes from what we projected. So the only other thing that has changed in the revenues is in our transfer from capital, which of course is an in and an out. The expenditures are then already accounted for. That is increasing due to other expenditures that are being able to be moved into the capital transfer, and as well as charters. There was a changing from the Department of Education and how we are coding things, and it has to come through the transfer now.
So what that means is normally we get the charter schools are the only ones receiving PICO dollars. And then we also share in our capital revenue with our charter schools. That all has to be transferred from the capital fund into the general fund, and then a check written to the charters. We used to just pay it straight from the capital. And DOE has said, no, you need to, I don't know why, but, so that's why it looks like it's more.
Speaking of charter schools, I know we didn't apply for any of the CARES funding for, for employers. We didn't get that, but I understand that there were some charter schools that did. Do you find,
Oh,
do you know who did?
PPP?
Yeah.
The PPP, yeah, we weren't eligible as a governmental entity. But
Yes, they
charter
did.
schools
Yes, they
were?
did.
But the charter schools absolutely did.
Yes, they did.
Because they are corporations, 501c3s, so they were eligible. I know of a couple. Military received over $1 million
Yes.
in PPP.
Several of them did.
Yeah, so if they applied for it, they were eligible.
And I'm sure they needed it to cover switching to remote and some of those other things, but
Yeah, their revenues weren't harmed, just like ours weren't at the end of last year. But yes, many of them
the
did.
revenues weren't cut, but there were more expenses.
Expenses, correct.
So I can't hold that against them at all.
No, they also share equitably in the CARES Act funding for the ESSER grant and the GEARS grant and the sanitation grant, and so, as do our private schools.
I guess good for them that they could apply for it. Maybe the second time around, the other schools will. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another round coming, I think.
Ms. Corcoran, can you just explain one other thing, I think, for all of us?
Sure.
In the actual 2019-2020, when we look at Best and Brightest, you see $4 million, and then over an adopted budget 2021, it's not there. There's nothing there. And then also down a little bit lower, the recognition program, $3 million last year, but again, not in there this year. And kind of explain that.
Sure. So in the previous, I'd say, 3 or 4 years, we had a program called the Best and Brightest Scholarship Program. And so basically, if you had scored in the 80th percentile of your SATs, you were eligible for a bonus, and if you were highly effective, you were eligible for a larger bonus. So this was around for a while.
By you mean teachers?
Teachers, yes, classroom teachers. And then that was replaced this year with the teacher salary increase allocation, which is $7.8 million. So it's about an additional $3 million that's coming in. But they were both what's called categorical funds. So the money comes in, it can only be spent on that. It can't be spent on, turning the lights on. It can only be spent on those items. And the teacher salary increase allocation is what we used when you guys approved the contract with the union in terms of raising our minimum teacher salary to $47,500.
And I understand the department budget does not have the recognition dollars in the budget for this upcoming year either. So perhaps it'll be, we take the test, but they're not going to go against
the school
scores.
recognition. Well, that was
But there won't be
vetoed,
school
yeah.
recognition dollars again if the tests aren't going to be counted towards the teachers'
Correct.
evaluations.
I mean, Governor DeSantis vetoed it out of the budget because there were no assessments. So there was no need, there were no school grades.
There were no
was no need
assessments,
for
so there's
school
no
recognition
rewards.
funding out of the lottery. That comes from the lottery. So, so that was vetoed out of the budget for this year. So that's why it's not here. Again, if it's not included in the department's budget, maybe there's that anticipation. We can only keep our fingers crossed for that. But I do know the department's budget did include the $500 million for the teacher salary increase allocation, their budget request, legislative budget request. So that was hopeful, because the worst thing we want is to have a one and done with these dollars, so. Sorry.
So if you go to page 2 of the worksheet showing the budget, the appropriations, this is the appropriations by function in which the expenditures are trending. You can see that under instruction is the largest decrease, and that's obviously because that's where we spend the most money. One of the main reasons that this is trending lower is because as we were talking about before with the charters and the way coding has to happen for their PICO dollars, the state has wanted us to move where we are coding the expenditures from the instruction function down into the facilities function, and that's over $3 million. So that's why you see facilities acquisition going up, because of a coding change there. The other reductions in instruction are across the board, but mainly because of, with our 5-day count and our enrollment being lower, we reduced 34 instructional units in which we didn't have the students for. And also because we have many individuals on leave, so we have a lot of vacancies. And that's how it is trending right now. So those are the main changes in the appropriations by function as far as the larger numbers. Everything else is generally just moving in and out depending upon how schools are transferring those dollars.
There is one other line item, the operation of plant, which shows it's not material, but a larger increase. And that is because we are pushing more air through, so our energy costs are higher. So, because we are running them longer, pushing more through. Is that correct, Jody? Right? So those bills are higher, so, which we
And
were
I think we're
expecting.
bringing in more outside air too that we have to cool.
Right, agreed.
Oh, and the filters.
Yeah.
So with those anticipated changes and the budget or the appropriations ending this way, towards the bottom of page 2, you can see the surplus deficit that is anticipated, how the year will end at this point in time. Budgeted was a deficit of 21 million, and now we're seeing that it's trending better, and this also includes the raises that were approved. So this is good news. So it's trending at about 18 million deficit, which still leaves us with the ending financial condition ratio of 10.91% to go into next year at this point in time. So again, really good news. On page 3, I'm sorry.
Ms. Goodwin has a question or
Yes.
comment.
Before we leave this financial section, and maybe this will be more appropriate another place, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the CARES dollars and where we stand with that. And
So we implemented the pay raises on November 30th. So now we have what the actual dollar value is, or what a teacher is making, because it was retroactive to the beginning of the year. So we had said we were using the CARES dollars for the 5 days that we added for training, and that was approved. There was some discrepancies when it came to what proportionate share meant for our private schools. So I don't know if you remember reading about Betsy DeVos saying they receive it proportionately based upon their enrollment. So that's how we originally did our budget. I disagreed wholeheartedly with that, as did apparently many people, because it went into a lot of court cases in Washington State and some other places. So ultimately, she reversed her position, and so we had to recalculate all of that to determine what our final real number was. And by making that adjustment, it added $300,000 into the district's amount that we were
Excellent.
able to apply for. And that was just approved yesterday. So we've, actually last week or Friday night, I sent the spreadsheet over to Sandy Gannon in my office, who handles the grants. And it literally has every teacher, where they're costed to, and what the value of 5 days was, and if they even work those 5 days, because we've hired teachers. So we have some that are 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then those that were hired after August, whatever the extra, the 20th, I think it was, they don't qualify. So we did the whole calculation. We have it. There's more dollars that we paid than are actually available in the CARES Act, because another portion of the grant was used for program specialists and some extra duty day contracts for the Blackboard Learn project, and getting that up and ready for our remote learners. So, but overall, we should be making that request this week for the at least 4.8 of the 5.1 million that we're eligible for. So I know there's been a lot of talk about, education funding in the legislature, wanting to know why these dollars haven't been spent, because you're claiming that you're suffering. And I agree. It's just that there's the administrative burden of having to change what went to private schools. We've done a pay raise, and I only wanted to bite the apple one time. I didn't want to keep going back with nickel and diming it and saying, oh, well, these teachers got a 7.22% raise, so I need more money from that, and these only got a 3% raise. I just wanted it to all be done. So, but we should be done. I know that Miami-Dade and Broward County are both still having trouble getting their application approved.
yes, they are.
There was a provision in the CARES Act that you could supplant. It wasn't strictly supplementing like Title I and IDEA, but those in charge of approving our grant dollars don't see it that way. So you have to either demonstrate a revenue loss, or it has to be a supplemental activity. So for us, it became easy when the board approved the 5 additional days that were much needed for our teachers. It became super easy for us to make that application. So that's kind of where we stand with that.
Thank you. I know this has been a long journey for you, and I appreciate all your hard work that
So
your department has put in.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have that money in our coffers by the end of the year.
Yeah, and I think it would be good. I think we'd all like to see what dollars came in and how they were used, or being used, the CARES dollars. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, they're all in a separate fund. We've got them on their own specific fund. They all have their own specific project, so we can give that to you.
Good. We'll be having lots of these budget meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Get it next time.
So then on page 3 is just a breakdown of the expenditures, or the appropriations estimated, the projected actuals based upon the objects, which is sometimes easier for individuals to see. But basically, it shows it by the salaries and benefits, which of course are being reduced. We did reduce units that we didn't have students for. Purchase services is mainly because of, that's where the travel is located, so that's not happening. And also legal fees are down. And then materials and supplies, our energy services are trending just down a little bit. We kind of budgeted like we thought that was going to actually come in. And then materials and supplies is just a little bit more. Other expenses are trending down, and that's, just various reasons. I'm sorry, other expenses are trending up, my bad. And that has to do with, that didn't make sense to me. So that has to do with add-on FTE testing. Our schools that earn the AP, IB, and ACE monies through the testings, those tests are very expensive as our services that they provide, but they earn the funding for it. So that's kind of theirs. So all in all, it is trending very well. Like Mitzi said, it was a breath of fresh air to see that they were going to be able to fund us the way we were. So now, which we've already been doing, and the superintendent had directed us, we have been doing our zero-based budgeting for our departments, which we started this year, which was a great thing for us because we are actually trending the way we thought we would be. Departments were very participatory, and this year we're starting again, and everyone's building their budgets on zero-based, but in addition, the superintendent gave a directive for everyone to be looking at proactively 5% reduction in case we had to do it, because we have to start this process early because, things are already getting into place and we don't know what's going to happen. So it's so much easier to make those decisions when it's not actually in front of you and you can have time to think about it. So they've been already working on that, and everybody's coming up with ideas for how that would impact them and if there's any level of service, changes for them. So with that being said, we brought the boards, which we did last year. And so we're ready to do that with you all and see if we can set up what your zero-based budgeting is going to look like so we can make sure we have the correct funding available.
This is really the only venue we have to discuss these items with you, with all of you having the ability to provide input. So, and your budget's not super big, so. So you should have a sheet that looks like this that you were provided that shows what your non-salaried dollars are. Because your salary dollars are you, 5 board members, and Kathy, so there's going to be no change there. So if do you want to lead them through that conversation? Because you have some additional notes on here that they can see.
So Rob Macaluso in the budget department is your budget specialist, and he's put this together based upon your actuals for the last few years, and then an estimated budget for, or what we think is going to happen for 21, what you had. But if we look at what you had in prior years, that kind of helps you build what next year is going to look like and what we had this year. So what was in for overtime, to do another, this year's budgeted is 3,500. So I'm not sure if you think that will be adequate based upon what you know is going to be happening and you guys will be requesting of Kathy. And the next one is the professional services. There's 55 in there for budgeted this year. The actuals were much higher in 2020. Items that were listed in that for 2020 was the Kroll's Associates Policy Review, so that was in there.
Oh, okay.
Superintendent Search Committee, Internal Audit Plan and Risk Assessment, other consulting and courier services, those kind of things are all in there. Didn't spend anything in your technology-related things, so not sure if they think that's going to change for the upcoming year. Didn't have anything insurance and premium hit your cost center for a while. Don't anticipate that. In-county travel, that was based on 5,000. That's kind of when you guys submitted what you thought we were going to be doing, so we can estimate that again. Out-of-county travel, same Same thing, what you know of conferences and things that are coming up and you think we'll have to budget for. And mobile telephone, not sure if any changes have happened with that. I know that for those who had phones, and individuals have switched positions, so I'm not sure if phones have moved.
So do you want to just kind of start at the first one and we'll just kind of do each one of them individually? Do you want to do it that way? Oh, yeah, I mean, if you're not ready to talk about it, we can just go through it now and then we can talk about it at the whenever you want to talk about it at the next, another workshop. It's totally up to you.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
questioning, what is the $1,800 for mobile phones?
They're
Is
districts,
that the phones that are given to members and?
the cell phones, your district cell phones.
Okay.
Yeah, district cell phones.
That sounds high to me because I don't have a.
You don't have a district cell phone?
Do you have
I
one?
have one, I don't use it.
I don't, I use my own.
Well, if you don't use them, let's turn them in and get them turned off.
Yeah, I don't have it. I don't have one.
I guess what is the monthly charge per member? But the issue is we're supposed to be using them so that we
For public
do our
records
emails and
purposes.
stuff on there for public record.
Well, your
I've got
emails
that
will still
handled.
be covered. It was more about text messaging.
It was about text messages,
Oh.
which I store mine in the cloud and on a
Right.
iPad, and I've got
I
that
will say,
covered.
2020, your actual was 1,753.92, which is why your budget for the current year is 1,800. Whether, if you don't think you'll be using cell phones, then we'll cut it down and make a change. It's totally
using one.
up to you, but every one of you are allowed to have a cell
I think
phone.
it's
And
fine if you
I
do.
think Mr. Hardy would prefer you had a district phone that you used to do district business with, so you didn't have to turn over your personal phone. But that's, I guess, a board member's preference, so.
I would agree with all of that.
So, however you wish to do that. Kathy's overtime, so let's just start with the very first one. So Kathy's had overtime that's ranged from $2,000 last year to $3,600 the year before. I'm not sure what may or may not come about that may cause her. I mean, now you have an audit committee for which she does provide administrative services for, so I'm not sure if that might increase it or not, or if you want to keep it the same. Kind of your call.
It's trending on budget right now, so that was a good budget last year, but not sure if, things will go up.
And if we have evening meetings that run into the late hours.
Right, and I think that may be a reason why Kathy didn't have as much overtime, because remember, during the pandemic, our meetings were all during the day. So that could have been a reason why it wasn't quite as high in 2020 as it was in 2019. So again, if you are going to have night meetings, I would say you probably want to leave that alone. Professional fees, again, this includes the lobbyist, which I think we pay them like $50,000 a year, don't we?
Not
Yeah.
quite.
Yeah, and then the courier services that we pay. However, what isn't included in here that we probably need to add are your internal audit services for your engagements with your internal auditors.
Very good point.
So we should probably get that added in there. The external audit I carry in my budget, so, but since they report directly to you as a board, I think it probably is more appropriate to be in your cost center. And again, this is technology-related professional services. I'm not sure that, I mean, it doesn't look like in 2018, you spent $5,000. I don't even know what that was. Can you see what that was? Of course, in 2018, I don't think we charged it to 319, but. So in-county travel, that's basically your mileage for going to all of your events. Oh, the $5,000 was e-agenda. So we pay an annual license fee for that, do we not, Kathy? It may be we put it under dues and fees. Okay, well, we have to pay for that, so we'll figure out where it goes. You need your e-agenda system.
And, you know, in terms of in-county mileage, the years that we do referendums, we have greater mileage because,
That's a
you know,
very true
traveling
statement.
around in a circle, big
Well,
circle.
and that's a true statement, and this is your 21-22 budget,
That's-
so it is a referendum cycle.
Yes.
So I agree with you. So it looks like 18 was 5,800 and 19 and 20 were less. So the 5 probably will be okay because I think the
Right.
reimbursement rate has gone down since 18.
Right, 58 was 18, and that's when we did the referendum, so
Yeah,
that might be realistic.
yeah. So, yeah, because the 18 was when we did the last referendum, so. Okay, and then out-of-county travel, this again is to conferences. I know that in 2020, a lot of your travel was covered
All of my travel that I did, I think,
last year.
almost all of it was
Yeah.
covered, and it will be covered in '21
But not in 22.
and part of '22, because I'll be past president, so.
Oh, okay. So just trying to get an idea, do we think that's a good number? Do we need to increase it, decrease it?
Yeah, well, I would think we might be adding Karen and Tom, but we
Correct.
won't be, I doubt that we'll be going to Tallahassee as a group this year.
We're not.
Well, this is for next year. This is for just beginning in July of 21
Yeah.
through June of 22. So fingers crossed, you would be able to, travel again. So again, yes, that's correct. You know, Mr. Robinson did not use any district funds for his travel or any of his expenses. So we have new board members on now. So if they wish to travel, it's totally within your purview to be reimbursed for your travel on district business. So if you think that that's not going to be enough based on what we've spent 18, 19, 20, and you want to increase it, we can do that. Just let me know.
Well, there might be some training classes that would be remote that both Karen and Tom would want to.
You know, I'd almost
advantage.
like to separate out that training and professional development, you know, because those conferences, I think, are somewhat different than some of the other ones. And, you know, I think it's great to get the board members certified as,
And so it still falls under out-of-county travel if they're traveling. So however you wish to do it, if it's virtual training, we usually put it under what's called dues and fees because you're only paying the registration fees. But when you're traveling, we usually include the registration in as a component of your travel, and it's all one line item.
Okay.
So however you guys want to do that, and you don't have to figure all of this out today, you can figure it out. Maybe we just talk about it at your next workshop or whenever you want, January sometime, give you an opportunity to kind of go through it and maybe figure out what it is you want to do or as far as your travel for next year. We have to adopt that as part of the budget anyway, so. Because the board has to approve their travel at a public meeting. So we usually try to do that along with the budget cycle. Again, mobile phones, how many mobile phones we have and what number. So, Mrs. Brown, if you don't think you're going to use your phone, Mrs. Goodwin, I know you said you don't use yours, so we should just get those services
I don't have one.
terminated. Oh, and you don't even have one. Okay. So, Mrs. Brown, if you have one and you don't use it, I guess we can just terminate the service.
well, I don't text much within the district,
Oh, okay.
so.
But you still use the telephone.
Not much.
So, I think the charges, what are they, 45 a month? I think they're 45, it's $45 a month per line or something.
You're right now having a monthly charge of $145, so it would seem like there's 3 phones.
Okay.
You know, I'm at that age where, you know, you give me a device and you get used to it, and then to have one and the other, I mean, like, how do I turn this one on or off?
Oh, I know.
It gets complicated when you've got 2 totally different devices.
Right. Okay. So if you wish to have a district cell phone, I don't know, Mr. Edwards, do you have one?
Yes, I do, and I use it.
Okay, perfect. Great. So we know we have one, and Mrs. Goodwin doesn't have one. Mrs. Brown has one. Mrs. Rose has one. Mrs. Ziegler has one. So we have 4 now. So we'll just make the modification for 4.
And I think that's what this basically comes out to. It's what, not, $45 a month
Yeah.
times 4 times 12.
Other purchase services, what's that line item? Teacher of the Year, Arts and Cultural, Sarasota Chamber, Tiger Bay.
Why was it so much money this current year?
31,620. There's something else in there.
Have we always had Teacher of the Year in there? I thought that was the foundation.
It's not the cost of the programming, it's maybe the cost of the tickets.
Of the what?
Tickets,
Cost of the ticket.
maybe. It's the tickets to attend, right? Yeah.
Well, that was
This is-
quite an increase to $31,000 from,
Well, I don't
That
think
might
it's all
be
Teacher
Kroll.
of the Year.
Is that Kroll, perhaps?
No, Kroll is up in professional services, because Kroll was 170,000 or something, I believe. It was.
These are the items that hit last year. So we have Teacher of the Year. We have
Well, what was that? Do you have the dollar amount on that?
the Teacher of the Year. This expense was only 125. I'm just rolling through the expenditures. There were probably
so-
multiples as they would hit.
What brought it up to 31,000?
Yeah, there's AAUW, there's a membership fee, 99th anniversary celebration for women's equity. There's VACC annual meeting, Tiger Bay. There's just multiple things in here. The 2019 Freedom Award honorees, GHM Sarasota Herald Tribune ads.
A Herald Tribune ad would,
Was the ads that probably were.
was that the superintendent search?
Most likely, because I don't know what, yeah. I don't know what else would,
I mean, we had so many more meetings. So.
oh. No, that's probably it, then,
Yeah.
the monthly ad then.
yeah, it might be
Monthly
the
ads.
advertising for superintendent.
Ignite Education Awards for Teacher of the Year.
Oh, would it have been the 25,000 for FSBA for the
Yeah, I was
superintendent
thinking it
search?
could have been the
Because
superintendent's
even if you add all
FSBA.
those, that's no way you could get to.
Although I would have thought that would have been up under professional fees.
Yeah, then there's let's see, this is only 3,900, but it's legislative representation for Capital City Consulting.
Oh, okay. It's just in the wrong line item.
And
So
Mark-
your 0390 and your 0310 kind of get commingled between other purchase services and professional fees, so. Okay. So it's kind of a combo of all of those. It may not have been that much, but I think the large majority of it may be the Herald.
Yeah, but for some reason, the budget was 200,000 more than it was the year before, and it's like, whoa.
Well, 170 of that was Kroll and 25 of it was FSBA.
Okay.
And then you
There you
had
go.
the advertising fees in all of those periodicals for the superintendent.
Okay,
There
so
was
those
that
two
list
things
that we were
alone
provided.
would-
I think a lot of the ones you listed were the superintendent advertisements too.
Okay.
And I think that was estimated by FSBA to be about 5,000. So between the 170, the 25, and the 5, you've got your 200 right there.
Okay, thank you.
So, and then consumable supplies is just office supplies. It doesn't even look like you have enough because it's a little low compared to what you spent last year and a couple of years ago. Although I think last year some of that was the super search, yeah. So. And then dues and fees, which is, a big portion of that is the value adjustment board fee that you have to pay to the county every year.
Has that increased again? I know at one
It
point,
keeps going up, like, it's double what it
I've
was from
asked
when
a
I
couple
first started
times.
working here.
Okay.
And I ask them for a complete breakdown. I mean, they give me detailed expenditure report, because I want it.
Right.
And we have to pay our proportionate share based on statute, so it is basically ultimately what it ends up being is the total cost of the, like, project, the value adjustment board project or cost charged to that, and then we pay our proportional percentage of it. It's just really gone up, though. I think maybe the appeals, there's more appeals now.
It's 126,000 this year.
Yeah, so your budget isn't even enough to cover it for the current year. So this should probably be 130 for next year.
But dues and fees used to include value adjustment board and any other association dues. So if
Yes, that's
that
true.
increased, okay.
That's true. So we should probably adjust for that also. But I mean, I think you can see where the largest increase is coming from the value adjustment board, because it was like 98, 118, 114, 130. Oh,
We didn't pay
Next.
that, we didn't pay our value adjustment board fees 1 year.
it was,
Did
that was
reflect
a
this?
long time ago. They didn't charge us for a couple of years.
Correct.
And so then we worked out an agreement where we got the normal bill and we paid a proportionate share of
Correct.
what they failed to charge us over like 3 years. And we did, yeah, that was a long time ago, but yeah.
I can't remember when.
I
it was.
actually knew who was in charge of the clerk's office and stuff, who was doing the billing, and she called and she goes, "Okay, we really messed up, so can we fix this?" I'm like, "No worries. I mean, we have to pay it by statute." So we got it all taken care of. That was quite some time ago. But another thing that we need to add on here is the supervisor of election charges, because 21, 22 is the referendum year. So we need to add a budget for that also, for the fees to run the election.
And a discussion I was having with the supervisor, Ron Turner, just about general elections, period, is that with so many more mail-in ballots, they have to mail out all those absentee ballots for the referendum for everyone who had requested it for the general, so costs may go up.
That makes sense. Way more mail-in ballots. So, okay, so we'll put that under dues and fees also, and I'll just make a note.
So we have to add the referendum.
I believe, yes.
That looks like that's what that hidden under the referendum line.
Well, if it was in
I was gonna say, don't we have a
2018
separate line? I thought we used to have a separate line for it.
We
just 'cause
do.
when-
It's, if you look under the 2018 actual, you will see it, because we actually charge it directly to the referendum. So
Okay, I
if
see.
you look above, you'll see 0390 for other purchase
Mm-hmm.
services, and then you'll see a project 0485 at the back end. That is the millage project.
This is 3 years from the last time. I mean, I would think it's every 4 years that we have that added
It'd
in.
be March of 2022.
22.
It will be 4 years, because you have 19, 20, 21, and what we're talking about is the 21, 22 budget. The next year's budget.
We're going the wrong way.
Well, if we have to do the budget reductions, I think the ones that you've given us, because we probably won't have the professional services and some of those other things, but I would think the referendum, should be outside of that.
Well, of course, as is the internal auditor fees. I mean, that's a new cost you've never had before, so we can't say, you need to cut 5% from that. I mean, we know that. So I don't know, based upon those two items alone, how you would ever cut 5%. But if you look at stuff that's currently occurring this year, if there's any way to make the 5% cut, then that would be
Well,
great.
in some ways, we can make more than a 5% cut because we don't have the Kroll report. And
Well, that was last year. We're talking about 5% from this year, 2021.
If I may, some of the, and I don't know that this would be necessarily an issue, but, and especially if we go to other purchase services, I know in that item, there were probably some tickets to whatever. I don't know if we're really attending that many events these days. Is that something we could potentially project, or as a board come to some kind of cap or something like that, just to try to be reasonable on that?
So
I don't want to limit our, involvement to different community events, but I'm wondering if that's somewhere we can review.
I think a lot of the other purchase services, I think some of them were events from the 1920 year before we went into the pandemic. But I think the majority of them from 1920 were for advertisements for the superintendent search. So, but and then putting the ads in the paper because I think we met so much more often.
That's still really high.
You do it monthly. Yeah. So how about we do this? You guys can kind of mull all of this over, and when we come back at the next workshop, we'll do it again, but we'll provide you with what you've spent to date in the 2021 column and what you've spent it on, so that then you'll have a better idea of what maybe you can or cannot reduce for 21-22. Do you think that would be a good option? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, because what our departments literally do is they have the information line itemed, and then we take it and we basically put it in so that we can, if we get questioned, we have the detail behind what built that budget. So yeah, take the time to list it all out, and then we can make sure we put it in the same way.
Okay, so we'll give you year-to-date.
I'm not sure if you saw our legislative meeting yesterday, but
I was in another meeting.
one of our
so-
priorities, of course, increase the BSA, but we definitely want to impress upon our legislators how the FRS
Yes.
affects us. And as they explained, and I didn't understand this, that the Education Appropriations Committee really didn't know. They don't get that same kind of information because the FRS comes out of the government ops
Right,
a budget.
Right.
And so we want to make them aware that those two things have to go together. And if they're going to be approving the FRS appropriation, that they need to put the money in the budget for that. Because, well, what was it, a $40?
well, it was a $40 increase in the
$75.
BSA, but it was,
A $75 per student for the FRS, so
Correct.
we actually were cut $35 per student.
yeah. it was
Hopefully,
an
we don't get that
18
next
yeah.
year.
It was an 18% increase in the FRS rates. It was pretty significant.
It was pretty
this year.
substantial.
And they're discussing that they would need to do about that same increase for this coming year, which is like maybe do it over a couple of years would be nice.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so
So
hopefully.
we're really trying to emphasize that to our legislators, that they have to watch that, because if they're going to make us do that this year,
Yeah.
or in the coming year's budget, they've got to give us the money back,
Right.
or allow us to.
And fortunately, the FRS system is well-funded, and, in terms of their actuarial funding. So that is another good thing that they can hopefully take into consideration. I think they're looking to get 100% funded, and that's a lofty goal, and more power to you. I just think that burden might be really difficult on school districts if they don't, offset it with the appropriate funding, yeah.
Well, when will we be starting? Yeah, we don't know what we got this year yet.
Correct.
So how do you even figure a continuation budget? Because it'll probably be a continuation budget of the 5%.
For departments, that is what we're doing. I mean, we're not doing a continuation, though. We are making them zero-based budget. So we're
Okay.
making them look at every line item. What are you going to spend this on? Where are you traveling to? Who's going to have in-county mileage and why? And we have had some conversations with Jody in transportation. We have some, I think it's social workers who are traveling in, $800 of mileage a month. Well, maybe we just need to get them a white fleet vehicle. So lots of those kind of conversations we're having to just try to see what we can do to make some changes and become more efficient. So the zero-based process, going through that exercise, allows us to try to find some of these ways. And so they do it first with their budget accountant, and then they do it with me.
Okay, so that's the that's the appropriation side of it.
Correct.
But
Having no idea what the revenue
the revenue side, yeah.
Correct.
That is such a, and again, it's if that FRS out there is it's bigger than the elephant in the room.
Right. I mean, the only good thing is that after the Revenue Estimating Conference adjusted their estimates, I mean, we've now had 3 continuous months of coming in better than projected, which is great news that maybe
When you
the
say we,
recession-
that's the state of Florida.
The state, I apologize. State revenues have come in better than they were adjusted to come in, which is a good thing overall. Whether, everyone has needs and demands and requests, so whether those come to us or not is we'll have to wait and see. But I think the more we can exercise frugality this year and set up dollars, we've made a $3 million improvement. We think we can get even more. Our principals have done, our school-based administrators have done a great job of not bringing positions they don't necessarily need, or, based upon, because they don't have the enrollment. We're kind of at cabinet, we're mindful of, every position has to come before us before it can be posted. So we're doing, and that's a lot of, we're 85% salary and benefits. So if that's where we can save the money, we can save the money. So I think we're doing a really good job, and we've still got more than half of a year to go. And so we'll keep working on it and hopefully tick that money down even further, which can add to the coffers to help offset whatever we may see in terms of a revenue loss in the 21-22 year. Hopefully, we won't see one. If we can just stay even, I would be thrilled. But if they increase FRS, then we're not even, so, so yes.
I just can't imagine putting my head on the pillow at night with all these numbers going through my head and just trying to figure it all out. Because
that's why it doesn't really ever go down on the pillow.
I just,
True story.
to try to figure out, like I said, we don't know for sure what we got or getting this year. So,
That's a true statement.
and there's just so many, but I appreciate you trying to make sense of it, and well, we used to use pencils, and now you can just change the numbers on the
That's why
computers.
she's
It's
got
a
her
little
laptop
easier.
with her.
But we appreciate you bringing us up to date.
Sure, and next time we'll come back, we'll go through, again, on your zero-based, and I'll bring you all the information on the CARES funding and where we're at with FEMA reimbursement, if any, and all of that stuff.
And just for a recap, you can send us, as you mentioned, all of each
The expenses.
account, right, all the detailed spending so we can get more granular. Okay.
Yeah, we can do a detailed expenditure report and send that to you guys. Year to date. Is there anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Oh, wait, Mr. Edwards?
Oh,
I just want to say the components of a true leader are what you're exemplifying today. You have sent a message to all of us that frugality and economy is important, and our hair isn't on fire. We're all dealing with this calmly and rationally, and well done, Mitzi. Good
yeah.
job.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Asplin,
All right, thank you. And
talk about not knowing what we're doing. What are we doing in January?
so first of all, thank you, Missy. Thank you, Krista. Appreciate the efforts there and everything that you do every day. You do a great job. Our next item, yes, is our second semester plan. And right now it is in draft plan. As you know, the emergency order was given to us December 1st, I believe, and the deadline for our plan to be sent to the Department of Education is December 15th. And so we've been working on that, and it is still a work in progress, but we just want to give you an update as far as where we were on this. I wanted to go through just, first of all, just briefly, the 4 goals of the emergency order, and then talk about the 7 assurances very quickly, and then the 4 questions that are basically a template for the plan coming from the Department of Education. And I'm going to give you a high-level view of this, and we have Steve Cantese and Chris Renoff and Deb Jackalone here also, who can answer our curriculum questions if you have any of those as we move into the plan as I go through this. I know we have 30 minutes, and that's why I'm going to do this. We're going to go through this at a high level. And again, it is a work in progress. First of all, if we're looking at the emergency order, it did have 4 goals there coming from our Commissioner of Education. Number 1 was building on the successful reopening of all of our public schools, going into an in-person instruction, as you know, open 5 days a week, and we'll continue that. Number 2, promoting parental choice while ensuring that every student is making adequate progress. Number 3, providing financial continuity, which you just heard from Mitzi, that they are providing that so that we can continue our full array of services. And then number 4, the fourth goal was empowering every district to maintain high-quality school choices for Florida students and families by trying to eliminate the achievement gaps, especially those that were exacerbated by the crisis. So those were the 4 goals coming out of the emergency order. And like I said, the draft is due on the 15th. Within that, we had we had 7 assurances there that came along with this, that all school districts must agree on these assurances. And the first assurance was that all schools will remain open. That goes back to the continuing of being open at least 5 days a week for all students. So we will definitely continue that. The next is continuing the full array of services, especially those to our IEPs, ESE students with IEPs, and also our ELL students and all the other areas for all of our students, making sure we have a full array of services as we do now, and we will continue to have, whether student is remote or face-to-face. And then assurance number 3, continue progress monitoring and interventions. And just want to touch on this just quickly, just so that you understand this one closely. The district agrees to continue to provide robust progress monitoring and requisite interventions to all students, which that's what we do already, with tiered support for students not making adequate progress, which again, we do already. Students who are receiving instruction through innovative learning modalities, in other words, students who are receiving instruction through our remote learning, must transition to another learning modality if they fail to make adequate progress. And that is something that we do already. You know, we meet with our MPSS team and we talk about students individually, and if what they're doing is not working, we try to figure out what we need to do to change their instruction or the instructional delivery, or what might work best for them. And we do that now, and what the commissioner is saying here is that if a student is not doing well remotely, that they must transition to another learning modality if they fail to make progress. So the district agrees to provide monthly progress monitoring reports to parents and guardians for students identified as performing below grade level and or demonstrating a decline. So that's, again, something that we've done, but they are asking at the DOE, they're asking for those progress monitoring reports, and that will come later on in the year. So we need to have a process and make sure that we are able to deliver that. We do have, as you know, our progress monitoring that we have in our plan number 1, which is our iReady, our Achieve 3000, and then our USA reports that we have for our EOCs. And so we'll definitely continue that. Assurance number 4 says continue charter school flexibility, so we'll certainly do that. We need to extend the same flexibility, instructional methods, and funding to every charter school. Assurance number 5, innovating learning modality. That, again, talks to our remote learners. And here, the district agrees that if a student receiving instruction through remote learning is failing to make adequate progress, the parents or guardians must be contacted and the student must be transitioned to a face-to-face situation. So that's a very important sentence right there. The district agrees that a student who is not making adequate progress will only be allowed to remain in the remote learning instruction if the district or charter school, number 1, provides written notice to the parent or guardian that the child is not making adequate progress and any associated education risks, and number 2, that the parent obtains written acknowledgement, or the district obtains written acknowledgement from the parent or guardian verifying the receipt of this information and the intent to remain in the remote learning environment. And so with that, I'll talk about it in just a minute. We have a letter that every parent will have to sign and send to us if we feel that they need to have the face-to-face environment and they're not doing well in remote. The parent will need to send that letter in signed saying that they prefer the student stay in remote even though they understand they're not doing well.
What about students who are in the virtual?
Yeah, so we have our students in our virtual world, and our virtual folks are watching them closely all the time as well. We try to, that is one in which those students stay in there throughout a semester, for instance, because they need to complete. And our teachers, I think, do a really, really good job of helping those students along in that virtual world. The only thing I will say about our virtual program is, we do have third-party virtual companies that help us, and we don't necessarily have as much control because those teachers teach for those third-party companies and so on and so forth. But our virtual folks over at STC who run our virtual program, they stay in touch with them quite frequently and the parents quite frequently to make sure that everything's moving along. If a student is not doing well, they're just really failing in that virtual world, we have conversations with them to say, look, you need to come back. You need to come back and be in our classrooms with our teachers.
What if a student is in the brick and mortar and isn't performing on grade level? Do we notify those parents too?
Yes, we always do that. Because we've always had our brick and mortar face-to-face instruction, and anytime a student is having problems, we have our MTSS teams and so on and so forth, and our folks really go through all that data, analyze the data, talk to parents, invite parents in, and we talk about that to see what else we can do within, as far as small group instruction, very small group instruction, individual instruction, there's different things and different modalities that we already do that with. But this is really, like I said, pointing to the remote student and what else can we do for that remote student if they're not doing well in that remote area. And then also, like you said, in the virtual area, if we do have students. But again, that's something that we've always done because we've had virtual for a long time as well. If they're not doing well there, then we are looking at those students. Number 6, truancy and attendance. The district agrees to continue to provide enhanced outreach to parents and guardians to ensure maximum in-student enrollment or in-person enrollment and participation in public schools. That's another part of the plan. And then assurance number 7, continue professional development. So with those 7 assurances, what they then gave us was a template that had 4 items on the template to address these 7 assurances and those 4 goals. And again, I'm going to touch these at a high level. Our folks here are here also. They can answer questions like what you were asking just a moment ago, Ms. Brown, about what do we actually do with our MTSS teams and so on and so forth. First of all, we have to focus on closing our achievement gaps. We have to target and outreach for students who are demonstrating a decline in the district's progress and specify additional interventions and supports. So in these 4 questions, they are broken down. For instance, 1A, the question is continue to focus on closing the achievement gap in a variety of ways, especially for those students who have had the COVID slide, so to speak. And one of the parts of our plan here, obviously, is to identify those students, analyzing the data, finding out who they are and what we may need to do. And then 1B, targeted outreach. That goes into, okay, what are we going to do when we have identified those students? And as you know, we analyze the data, we identify our students and their needs. We provide tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 interventions and a personalized plan for those students. And as you go through, you'll see the different plans here. And then it's broken down. We have it broken down by elementary, middle, and high. As far as what we do. And all this information, by the way, this is information that we already do. We've been doing this for a long time. We already do all of this. We're just sending it to the DOE to say, here's what we already do. And then our big thing is, if you are a remote student and you're not doing well, you need to come into the fold and let us help you with this.
Bridget,
Yes.
did you have a comment?
Oh, and I can wait until it's on assurance.
Okay,
for
we'll do
5.
it afterwards then.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. You okay after?
Okay, so then when we move into question 2, or item number 2 in our plan, that's where it talks about this letter that we created. And in cabinet, when we talked about creating a letter, we had put one together here for the whole district, but then we started to see that we needed to make it a little more specific per level. So in other words, the elementary students, middle and high have unique areas that we need to look at when we create this letter for the parents, as far as if you're doing well or not doing well in a remote situation, and then the parents would need to sign. But there's a copy of the letter there for you to read. And like I said, we're going to have 3 letters, and we're working on the others right now, and we'll be able to get those to you. And remember, even though I'm sending this as a draft December 15th, we will bring that also back to the board for approval on January the 8th. and then send the final plan into the DOE, all right? So that gives us a few more weeks to continue to work on this. And then number 3 talks about truancy and attendance of our students. And again, in here, we basically show all the different ways and the things that we have been doing to try and connect with, especially our remote students. And there's many, many bullets on here. And I know you've read through these. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but if you have questions, we can go through that. Home visits, all those things that we've been doing. And then 3B also specifically talks about VPK. And you know, with kindergarten and pre-K, we didn't have as many students in our system. And so again, it's trying to find out who they are, where they are, and try to talk them into coming back in. And I know we have something called kindergarten roundups in February, and that's something that we really, really need to work on to try and get them in. And then the last item was professional development, and you probably saw there's many sheets here showing all the professional development modules that we have and that teachers sign up for and others sign up for. And we just basically made a list of all the different PD that we do that we want to send into the DOE so they can see some of the things that we're covering here. Like I said, the draft plan is due on the 15th, and then the 8th is when you'll approve it as we bring it to the board. And then the other thing I wanted you to know was, you know, I did meet with union reps on Zoom last week and have talked to a few teachers. Also, we've had principals meetings, a couple of those to talk about, you know, just brainstorming ideas for our plan and so forth. So there's been quite a bit of input from at the school level. And like I said, one of the things that we found really was a lot of it, most of it is things that we already do. But what I wanted to talk to the principals about, and we had this conversation, was what does concurrent teaching look like in your school? Because we've gone from 70% face-to-face to now 80% face-to-face, because all along we have been trying to contact parents and connect with students and bring them back into face-to-face, especially if they haven't been doing well. So right now we're at an 80-20, 80% face-to-face. And with the principals, I really asked them to go back and talk with their teachers, their teacher groups, their grade level groups, to find out what is concurrent teaching going to look like now that you have more students coming in face-to-face. Is there a way for you to have more teachers in a normal face-to-face situation without concurrent or without remote students, and be able to have a small number of students who are remote? Different schools have different numbers. You know, even though it's 80-20, one school might be a 95-5, another school might be 70-30. So it just depends on your school site, what's going on there. Talking to your grade level teachers, for instance, second grade at a particular school, what should this look like, since we know we only have 5 students, for instance, in all of second grade that are remote? Do we need to have everybody working concurrent? Probably not. So we need to look at that and see if we can make some changes there. The other piece that we spoke about quite a bit was the quarantining piece, because as we quarantine, you know, students are at home for 10 to 14 days, and during that time, that throws teachers into a concurrent situation, even if they weren't. So if a teacher had all face-to-face students, and then all of a sudden 3 of their students are quarantined, now they are in that concurrent situation, some online, some not. Do we send those students to another teacher who is just a pure remote teacher, so that other teacher can continue to have just the face-to-face students? So those are conversations that we've had, and I know that principals are getting input from teachers as well as far as that concerns, and then we'll continue to work on our plan as we move forward. So with that, I'll leave it here, and if you have any questions.
We have some questions. We'll start with Ms. Ziegler.
Thank you, and I'm glad you touched on concurrent. So I'll start with one of the questions I had under Assurance 5, and this is from DOE, and it mentions about restricting when changes can be made to a certain
Excuse
time.
me, could you tell us the page number that you're on?
Page 3.
Okay.
Is the DOE's assurance, number 5. And in there, it states the restricting when changes can be made to a certain time of the semester, or requiring more than a week's notice prior to changing a student's learning modality are presumptively unreasonable. My challenge with that is, So I'm just curious how we're responding to that, because we have had, from an operational standpoint, having some, I would argue is reasonable as long as it's communicated properly, because to say, here's what our cutoff was, so let's just move into second semester, of saying any changes that may be made, we need to operationally respond, especially if we're looking at how we respond from the concurrent challenges. So am I interpreting this correctly, where they do not want us to, they want us to be fluid constantly?
What they're really talking about here, and just, being on superintendent's meeting is list to Mr. Corcoran and so forth. I think, 67 districts doing it 67 different ways. And, some districts put in place, I believe, look, when you make your decision in August, you can't make another decision until the end of the semester or the end of the 9 weeks, because that's just how we're going to operate. Then there's other districts that, if a parent made a change or wanted to come back face-to-face or vice versa, they made the changes fairly quickly so that, we can continue. And so what he's saying here is the expectation from the DOE is that we would make the change as soon as we possibly could, and it's unreasonable to tell a parent, look, our rule is that you have to wait 2 more months to be able to move into this other modality. What we need to do is, what we have really been doing too, is when we have a student that we know maybe a different modality would be best for that person, we need to get them moved in as fast as possible. Now, back to what your point was, you can only do that so fast, giving buses and other logistics situations. So we've done it as quickly as we can, but we always tell parents it might be a week, it might even be 2 weeks, it depends on, but we're going to do it as quickly as we can. And so I think this was to say, look, you all need to do that as quickly as you can. Don't just say, we're not going to make any more changes after this until the end of the school year or whatever. So that's what that was designed for. And I think we all along have been trying to do what the commissioner's saying we would like everybody to do. We'll continue to do.
And I just wanted to make sure, and I think thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
And then finally, when you touched upon concurrent, and I know that's a big concern, and one of the questions I had, and I know you're working through that, so I appreciate you working with all the stakeholders, but as we look at, since we're at an 80-20, and you mentioned each school is different, has there been a consideration if we were to do full remote, and I'm going to take out quarantining because that creates some unique challenges, but if we were to I'll take elementary, I think it's easier from a scheduling standpoint than any kind of secondary school, but if there was not going to be enough in one school to fill a teaching position, would it be possible, and I know this is unusual, but possible for if we had enough students in the elementary and X grade to fill a classroom across various schools? Is that something that's been considered? I know there's financial implications to that too, but I'm just curious if that's been considered.
I know, and I'll let you guys answer, but I know at the beginning of the year, when we did look at that, it was more of a secondary, even more of a high school conversation, because chemistry came up. And you might have 5 or 10 chemistry students across the districts who went remote, and there's only so many chemistry teachers, and how do you do that? And would it be better to have a remote class made up of multiple schools with a teacher? And we had talked about that before. And but as far as the elementary is concerned, we hadn't talked about that. Chris, did you want to say anything about that?
Early on, I know when Emergency Order 6 came out, all of those conversations started to happen at that point in time. And a big point of consideration was teacher of record, that relationship and making sure. And so again, the secondary example of physics and chemistry and whatever came up for discussion. At the elementary level, what we are really focused on more is how do we, like Dr. Asplund just said, how do we look within our grade level to say how do we mitigate the amount of students and or teachers that are having to engage in concurrent teaching, and if we can minimize that as much as possible, and then maybe either have enough students for a full remote or have maybe down to 1 or 2 teachers per grade level engaging in concurrent, so it's much more manageable than having it across the entire team.
And that would be by school though, right?
By school,
Okay.
Correct.
And again, I'll leave it at this, is that my biggest concern is very similar when we talked about policies for masks, et cetera, making sure staff felt comfortable so we don't lose them. I know I'm not the only board member that's heard from very concerned educators who are they say, you tell me to jump and I say how high, and they have jumped in and truly been remarkable, but the burnout is real. And I know we all are looking at that, but just trying to think outside the box, even if it's an unusual circumstance, and understanding the continuity, teacher of record. I mean, all of those play a huge role in the success of the student, but I also don't want to lose our quality educators either.
No question.
Thank you. Next, we have Jane Goodwin.
Thank you. I think this plan has got, some good points to it, and I think it answers the things that we were required to answer from DOE. But my concern is parents. And I think my concern has been teachers, and I think I have a real concern about teachers, but it's relative to parents. And I don't know what we can do, and maybe Sonia, your team, Deb, maybe you all have some ideas, but I listen to parents, and they blame us for everything, and that seems to be a common thread. This is not working. Remote is not working. It's your fault. And gee, I don't answer a lot. My friend here loves to let her fingers do the walking. But occasionally I do, and I had a parent recently that I answered with what I thought was a very thoughtful answer relative to this new EO and so forth. And boy, she just slammed me right back.
Well, you didn't give her the answer she wanted. That's the problem.
But is there anything that we could do to help parents understand this whole issue better? And of course, we're remote, but is there anything that we could do short of going out to the schools and having sessions with parents, which I think would be great? Is there something we could do to better educate them and better have them help us? Because although there are many, many parents that I know that are really trying hard with their students, maybe they're not there all the time, and maybe the student isn't participating. And I'm finding that, I'm hearing that's the case a lot of times. And I know in South Florida, it's mission to parents from some of the bigger districts. Your child must sign on in order to be a remote learner. I mean, it's not like, we don't have any telepathy going on here. But I don't have an answer, but I think it would make Steve Cantee's and Chris Renoff's job much easier, along with everybody else, if we had more of a plan for parents, maybe to educate them, maybe to orient them, maybe a process, a customer service process, if you will. But I mean, I just think there are some that don't understand, or perhaps are not getting the answer to their questions about, particularly those that are going remote and are frightened to come back to school. And it may be that they have comorbidity issues. The child may have some, so they're not going to come back. So if we have to offer them something different while they are home, and it's not to come back, which is the ultimately best thing that we could offer them, what do we do? Florida virtual is, over capacity from what I'm hearing from a lot of folks, and that is an entirely different process, as we all know. This is a very individualized instruction for individualized courses. You don't have the community that you have with the school. So I don't have the answers, but I'd love to see us formulate something or have a working committee to talk about this, because I think we're missing the boat with some parents, and they have fears and they have concerns, and maybe we're not answering those.
Well, yeah, perhaps at a middle or high school level, or even if they need it at an elementary, if each school had a time for parents to come in, and I would think for teachers to be there too, to voice concerns and get answers for that 10% might help. Next, we have Karen Rose.
Thank you. Along the lines of Mrs. Goodwin, I'm looking at page 5 under parent communication, and I'm interested in I consider it student-parent empowerment. And we're looking at over 77% of our students have at least one parent that access our portal that looks at attendance, grades, schedules, report cards, and so on. But then it references engaging in another campaign to reach 100%. I think that's key to everything in this document, and empowering not just the parents. I know students like looking at where they are and progress monitoring themselves. Can we know a little bit about what that campaign is to reach 100%?
I know that when Dr. Kingsley had received some feedback with regards to the portal and saw those percentages, that she, again, we meet with principals actually tomorrow, so an opportunity for us to engage in some conversation with them about how we might, because there's actually some schools that might be really, really high and others that you might think might be lower,
Sure.
or have lower participation, and it's not. So there's still some best practice out there. So I think we can gather some of that information from not only parents and stakeholders, but certainly our principals as well.
I think also it's probably time to remind parents again, how do you even go about the process? And some parents probably aren't in there because maybe they don't know how to go in, or, they're working 2 or 3 jobs and this is just something else for them to do. And what makes it easy as possible on them, and how do they do it, and how can they get in and get out and see what it's all about? So we can certainly look at that as well.
I think we also have to remove language barriers. I mean, we've got, 20 or more % of our students are ELL or not English language. So I know I've talked to, well, many of you probably know Jerry. She's been working in Manatee, and she's been hanging at one of the switchboards, and she's just surprised how many people call in that don't. This is up in Manatee, that don't speak English.
Right.
And so she's been the one that's kind of been explaining, and it's like, at these schools where we have high levels of minority enrollment, Hispanic enrollment, we need to have a teacher there, a Spanish-speaking, someone in the office that can speak to help these. If not there, at least in our office, there's got to be someone that these people can talk to
I
and
think,
get answers they can understand.
yeah, I think that's a good point. To Ms. Rose's comment about working towards that 100%, we'll definitely use our IT department. They have the names. We actually know who is and isn't, so we have the ability to communicate directly with those families, and we would like to get to 100%. The 77% is a pretty strong number when you think about it, but in this day and age and the challenges that we're facing right now, it could be better. And I think the schools, as Chris said, are working really hard to connect with those parents in a number of ways. It's a really challenging environment they're working in, but they're kind of reaching a standard we probably didn't anticipate. They're doing great work out there, and we're very proud of them. But as what you were talking about, the Hispanic population and other populations, language population, we have a project at Booker High School right now that we're funding around their graduation project. As we were looking into their data last year, it's very clear one of the challenges at the end of the year when we went into remote learning, it didn't hit us till about halfway through that fourth quarter that our Hispanic students in North County were really struggling. They started going, when they weren't coming to school, they started going to work, and school took a back seat. And so we've invested in Booker High School in a number of ways. Dr. Shelley's taken the lead, as she tends to do when we recognize that data. We have a really good project there. We're seeing incredible results out of that. So your point is well taken. That communication piece, Ms. Chafee is part of that group.
Well, and not only high school, but elementary across the board.
Oh, it's got to be. But
sure.
I think my point would be that we have a pilot now, I think, that we can see that's working, and certainly those schools that have large populations of minority populations as well as
Thank you.
language speakers.
If I could just follow up, it would be interesting to look at the students that fall in our achievement gap and those that are accessing and able to progress monitor themselves, and how having first language opportunities in that process, it would be an interesting correlation, how much of an impact that provides the students that don't have a gap.
And, and I think, especially in our case, that to some extent that achievement gap is in a misnomer, because I don't want to do this. I mean, I want to do this. bring the lowers up, but I don't want to stop the top. I want them to go. We surely don't want that to go like this. We want it to go like this, so that the lower learners get brought up, but that our top learners are continuing. I mean, we want to see at least a year's worth of progress for them also. So our focus isn't just on the lowest performing students. We want all students to get that at least a year's worth of learning. Mr. Edwards.
So I have been visiting a lot of schools in the last couple weeks, and I am 100% comfortable that the general improvement of wanting students to do better and to fix what's broken is already in place. So the 2/3 of this document is well under control, and you're doing that anyhow. So I'm comfortable with that as the process. The part that I have a question about is the professional development piece, because here's where I asked the concurrent question, and to your point, everyone's doing it entirely different. Some teachers are doing it better than others. Some are challenged. And so I'm looking in the professional development. Do you have some sort of dashboard that's telling you what courses in professional development are being utilized? And have you thought about looking at professional development for remote learning? Because I wouldn't just say concurrent, but in a crisis, what I've learned is that there'll be good nuggets of information that we'll learn from, and remote learning can be part of that. We can learn from remote learning and incorporate that to make it a better learning model down the road. So what I'm looking for is some way that we can absorb good best practices from what we've learned about remote learning and then incorporate it into professional development for teachers that are struggling with that model. The last thing I would think about, and I got it just as I was playing with that in my head, is offering some sort of development to our families, to our parents that might want to understand remote learning better, or quite frankly, anything about education and their students. So can we look at, because I'm seeing so much best practice information that's getting bandied around. Let's see how quickly we can absorb that and shoot it out to our families and to our teachers.
All right.
Thank you. Well, I think one of the things, we've got the COVID dashboards, but I'm thinking maybe we could explain that to parents so that they see that we're not getting the clusters in school, and what that means is it's not spreading in the schools, it's more or less coming from outside, but the quarantine affects us all. But there's also the dashboard that talks about the academics, and students or parents can access the ones for their children, right? Or with the schools. No. So I think even teaching them how to use that, because we shouldn't have to send them a letter. They should be able to go out there and know how well their children are doing.
And that goes back to the parent portal where they have every grade and every assignment and every day of attendance and every period of attendance is on there. So that's where they would access that information. The big information is on the dashboards for the district. They would be able to access the same information that everybody
perhaps the communications department could come up with a video that, I knew I'd get your attention if I said that. If we did a video explaining how to use that, I might even look at that, so that, parents will know how to get in there and how to get at that portal and how to follow it up. And I'm sure that there are students who would like that information too, so you would learn. And then there are, like, my husband tutors my granddaughter, so he can get in there and learn how to do it and whatnot. So I think, and we've got a lot of grandparents or others, caretakers or tutors even, that are working with these kids or their mentors or whatever, so that they know how to get on that. And I think a how-to video in English and Spanish would be helpful. Ms. Goodwin?
Thank you. That kind of goes along with what I was talking about. We've learned an awful lot from working with our summer leadership academies. And although our students have done well and haven't seen summer slide, man, what a great opportunity this has been for us to work with parents and parents who are afraid of schools. And we know a lot of them are. It's language barriers, it's other things. Yeah, they may use a portal, a student may use a portal to check their grades, but they're not using the portal and going in and doing all the many rich functionality that we have of that. I think it's, I think it's a couple of things. I think learning how to use that would be great. But I think we need an organic school level to be working with these parents in these tough times more than ever. It may be a Zoom call to a number of parents in a class. I don't have the answers, but I know we're not doing the things that we could do that would make teachers' jobs easier. And believe me, I'm interested in parents understanding our systems, understanding our portals, understanding all the rich functionality that we have at their disposal, but I can guarantee you they're not using it all. And that still means that in our community, these people have puzzlement or confusion or concern about what we're doing. And I think the more we can bring them into the fold and the more we can make it easier for them to understand this new world of learning, which may never change back. And with our COVID numbers going up, God knows where we'll be, in another month or two. But I think that, we need to find new and creative ways of reaching out, just like our Summer Learning Institute has done. I think we need to find new ways of reaching out to these parents, particularly those in the lower socioeconomic groups who may have issues of comorbidity and their families multi-generational and these kids are not going to come back. We better be reaching out to them and meeting them and finding out and fleshing out what their needs are. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have, notwithstanding executive orders from the Department of Ed and all that other stuff. We consider ourselves to be best. We consider ourselves to be a great district, and we are. But we have a lot of marginal parents who really don't understand this new world, and I think we have to make some concessions and do it better.
Thank you. Ms. Ziegler?
Thank you. No, I would agree, and I actually, a lot of this comes around the communication piece, and I know Dr. Aspen and I spoke some time ago as we talked about, as we saw that schools fortunately hadn't been the super spreader events, if you will, that we were not sure what it would be, and there was a lot of concern, rightfully so, from families that kept their children at home. But now, as we have more data, informing and educating them so that there is that element of, making them more comfortable with that, because there is a true benefit to their children's success of them being in class. Certainly makes the learning environment better, and also for our teachers. And so, that would be more of a high level of like a PSA of some sort, and perhaps in more than one language, because I think that's a great point that was brought up. But then when you think about those 77%, I think they're really, and I do believe we have the technology and ability to isolate who those are and do a more one-on-one outreach. But I think, everything that was discussed here can absolutely be achieved. And I think and to Mrs. Goodwin's point is, I think that, as a working parent, I get how busy it is. And so when we put these together, if we did a Zoom call by class or by school or something like that, being really cognizant about when you would make that available to someone, because it's likely going to be later on in the evening or what have you. I understand that puts more work and burden on our teachers and our staff, but I also know how important it is that they want this to be a successful partnership. And I have to imagine you guys are having conversations like this, but certainly if there's anything we can do to help on that aspect. But I do think there's some great points that were brought up here, and really ultimately will afford some success and build that trust. So,
Thank you. We've heard, when I hear from teachers who are frustrated about their concurrent learning, and I've talked to a few. One of them was a music teacher. I don't remember if I talked to her or if it was all these emails going back and forth, but she was a music teacher, and she was saying how difficult this was to teach them, remotely, and then she was, well, then we must have talked after so many emails. And then she was saying how, yes, it works with the second and third year students, but the first year teachers, it's just, the first year students, it's just so hard. They don't know how to do this, they don't, and that, but now they're getting the instruments. And so but when I said, but you know what, maybe we shouldn't do remote first year music. Oh no, I can do that. you know, so she would rather have them and try to, so it's like sometimes you just need to walk them through. If you don't want this, then we have that. So then she was thinking, well, yeah, there are some things that I can teach the first-year students. And I think we had another parent that was frustrated that their child was being marked absent or not being allowed on because they weren't signing on a timely manner. Again, that's like the teacher is there from, 9:15 to 10:10, so that's when you need to sign on. Just like when you're in school, the bell rings. And that gets frustrating. They don't understand sometimes. But again, if we educate, and more, I tell the parents and or the teachers especially, if you've got ideas on how we can make things better next year, or you're frustrated with the concurrent learning, talk to your school administration. They're the ones that are bringing the solutions, or they can have their own solutions at their schools. We can't fix all the problems that are happening at any individual school. That's the administration. So take your concerns, your frustrations to your administration, or just, tell them, at night, just spout them out or on the phone to somebody. But sometimes it's just frustration. They don't necessarily want to change anything. They just want to blurt it out and let everyone know how frustrating it is. And we all understand that.
For sure.
And we have services for that, mental health services for our students and our teachers having the frustrations. But I think it's important for them to work through their administration with any problems they're having or any solutions they can come up with.
Absolutely, yeah.
One thing we're hearing about, and I guess we'll talk about that on the calendar, we're not going to be having Wednesdays off for training. I don't see how that can possibly happen. They're asking for us 5 days a week, correct?
You're talking about extra planning time?
Extra time for planning, yes.
Right. And I know we did a preliminary survey, so to speak, through the union and so forth. And the list that I saw that Pat Gardner put together, there was no one who was asking for the Wednesday piece. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that, I don't know if you remember when we had our tropical storm and we ended the day halfway through the day, remember that? And we sent people home early. And, and I know it's a tropical storm, but just what we thought happens, and that is, when you do have those early release days, it still takes an hour and a half to get everybody off campus. So all that time you're supposed to be planning, you're spending on logistics, school logistics. And so teachers seem to think that, having every once in a while having that whole day off to where they can come in and just concentrate right off the bat from the beginning of the day to the end of the day and get a lot done. That was one of the items. The other thing that came up too, just so you know, is you might hear that, well, the superintendent might have been a little bit hesitant in saying that he's going to allow planning time going into second semester. And I think that was maybe misinterpreted. People think that what I was trying to say was, as we go in, we're now at 80-20. We were at 70-30, now we're at 80-20. And who knows, maybe we'll, by the end of first semester, which is not till the end of January, maybe 95% of our students will be back face-to-face, which means many, many less teachers might be concurrent. And so when you have that situation, let's say that you have 3 teachers at a school that are concurrent, well, I'd much rather bring in a sub and have that person just work and plan and so on, instead of shutting down the entire school for all the students. And then we have a minutes problem. We have to, be looking at our minutes because we've already used a few days. So it's very important that we look at all of that. I think our concurrent teachers need the extra planning time, definitely. It's just how are we going to do it might look a little bit differently than we did in the first semester, depending on where we are.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next item, the educational broadband.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
so
feedback.
much. And keep up the good work, guys.
Okay, our next item, our educational broadband service license. Jody Dumas is going to fill us in on that. I know we've talked a little bit about this, and we just want to make sure that there's complete understanding as we move forward with this particular topic. So, Jody.
Dr. Asplund, thank you very much. Board members, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you a little bit this morning about our EBS license, Educational Broadband Service. I thought what I would do is, given the fact that at this afternoon's board meeting, this contract for the sale of this license is on your agenda to approve. So I thought what we would do here today is just kind of talk about how you got to where you are today. And give you a brief kind of introduction. And then we've got a subject matter expert that we've been working with, brought on by Mr. Hardy and Mr. Maniglia, who's been an expert on EBS licensing for the past 30 years that has got us to this point. And we'll let her talk more about the specifics. But back in the 60s, the FCC issued EBS licenses basically as a public service to nonprofit organizations and educational institutions to be able to use in their communities to broadcast over. Some school districts and entities did use those channels to do that. Some did not. And in the 80s, they actually changed the law to allow for leasing of the licenses because they wanted to make sure those licenses were actually being utilized more. So several districts, hundreds of districts, decided to go ahead and start to lease their licenses. We never did. And the question is, why did we not look at that? And I think we were using it here and there, and I just really can't answer that question. But over this past year, one of the things that when Mr. Maniglia was brought on as Director of Communications in the first couple of days I handed to him was to look into our EBS license because we had been approached by several companies who wanted to actually purchase our license. And so that's one of the things that I said, hey, Craig, can you take a look at this for me? What do we need to do here? He worked very closely with Art Hardy in terms of, what should we do with these next steps? And I think they made a great decision to bring on a subject area expert who's dealt with EBS licenses her entire career. So Donna Balaguer is actually on Zoom today to be able to answer all your questions about our license, how we got to where we are, and why we think it's a good move to actually sell our license versus lease at this particular time. So with that, Craig, I don't know if there's anything you want to add, or if we just want to introduce Donna at this particular point. And Donna, are you available on Zoom?
I am available. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Yes, we can hear you perfectly. So Donna, thank you so much for appearing with us today. Would you take us through a little bit maybe a little more detailed history on EBS than I gave the board, and how, I think one of the questions has been is why so quickly? Why do we need to do something right now, and why a sale? So if you could take us through that in terms of your background with our license, that would be very much appreciated.
Certainly. Thank you for having me here today. I am an attorney with Fisher Richardson in Washington, D.C., and as Jody mentioned, I have been working with EBS licensees for over 30 years. So basically, the school board received this license for free from the FCC well over 25 years ago. And these licenses were only issued to educators for an educational purpose. The licenses were really intended at the time to be for remote distance television learning. The idea was that there would be TVs in the classroom and schools would pipe in video programming, big antennas on the roofs of schools and big transmitters and things like that. And obviously that system became obsolete over time, right? We have the internet, we have smart boards, we have a lot more advanced technology than TVs in the classroom. So at some point, EBS licensees really stopped using it for the original purpose. And as Jody mentioned, most licensees leased it out. The school board did not. We do know that in some point in 2011, for example, because you were required to make a showing to the FCC, we do know that you had that video system in place. You were serving about 20 schools. You were broadcasting the educational channel and C-SPAN and a few other TV channels into the schools. But at some point, again, that became obsolete and no longer used. So the license has really not been used for a while, and that was okay under FCC rules until recently. So the FCC started looking at EBS licenses. This spectrum has now been designated a spectrum that's very useful for broadband data services. At first it was used for 3G, now 4G, and now it's going into 5G. And it's primarily used nationwide by T-Mobile now, because most licensees do lease it to T-Mobile, originally Sprint and other companies, but now it's all in T-Mobile's hands. So what the FCC said, and this was, again, only in April of this year, is we're going to let EBS licensees keep the license, but we'll allow you to monetize it. We'll allow you to sell it for the very first time to these commercial operators. They're really the ones using it. We're not going to require that it be held by educators anymore. So that was a watershed moment for EBS licensees, that they could monetize this by selling it commercially. The other thing the FCC said, and this became effective only at the end of September, was that any licensee now that's not using the license for at least a 6-month period at any point in time will automatically forfeit that license. So that does become an issue for licensees like the school board that does not use the license. So with those two big changes, I was contacted, as Jody mentioned, and we reached out to T-Mobile, who is the major buyer of these licenses. And we also reached out to a new entrant to this buying of EBS licenses, Sonic Wave. Sonic Wave was formed by veterans in the wireless industry who've also been working on EBS licenses for their entire careers. They got some funding. They saw this as an opportunity, and they're sort of a disruptor to the market, to T-Mobile. And we reached out to a few other potential new entrants who we did not receive interest. So we ended up getting this offer from Sonic Wave for over $2.3 million to purchase the license, much higher than the T-Mobile offer, and T-Mobile was unwilling to match. We've had this draft agreement. The most important thing here is the timing, because we are facing the 6-month period where the license will be forfeited at the end of March. It does take the FCC a few months to approve the sale of a license. We have to go through an application process. I don't anticipate any issues with it, other than it takes time. Sonic Wave has agreed in the contract that if we don't have the approval by January 20th, that they will construct facilities at their expense to avoid forfeiture of the license for non-use. So that's a great benefit to the contract, but they've agreed to that only if the contract is approved this week, because we do need to get that FCC application on file. So that's where we are in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Goodwin?
My question really is, or my statement really is for Jody and Craig. I think I will support this purchase after finding out about it, but I just guess I don't like the way we initially did this. I think that it should have been brought to or discussed with the school board last spring when you all first started looking at this, and it kind of came to us like, oh, let's approve this at a board meeting last month. And, I just didn't like the way the process went. I think it's always important that we communicate together, that we, cover this in a timely fashion, and I just wish that we had done it a little differently. But other than that, I will be supporting it, and I really don't have any questions. I did look into this. I don't see that we have any use for it. I don't think it will hamper us or hinder us anyway in our television station or anything else going forward, so I will approve it.
Ms. Ziegler?
Yeah, so this is interesting. So first I want to thank the superintendent for putting a pause and bringing it back to us, because it was news to me, and to Mrs. Goodwin's point, anything that's rushed, I think it's our responsibility to do due diligence, and so this gave us that opportunity and to better understand it. I guess my question is, and on the surface, and as I've done some research, it's actually pretty interesting, and it's ironic how rapidly quick it moves. So ironic, that's just naturally going to raise eyebrows. So I did more research because I just find it interesting. But are other school districts leasing or selling? Because I know we have the option to do either. We weren't really using it at all. I understand there's administrative aspects to leasing it that there's a cost likely incurred there from a contractual standpoint. But can anyone shine a light as to that comparison, as to what the cost benefit or what have you is?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And obviously those are the conversations we've been having over the last several months about what's the best thing to do for the district. And Donna, if you would jump in, I know you've done a lot of work with other districts and you've got a good feel for, what does that market look like, why some have leased, why some have started to sell. So would you talk about what other entities have done?
Sure. So let me preface by saying that probably 95% of licensees already have leased for many, many years the spectrum. So, and most of those leased to T-Mobile at this point. So they don't have the opportunity to go out to the market and get competing bids. They really, for the most part, can sell only to T-Mobile, or else they have to take some creative legal measures. So, but since April, there have been about 75 sales. And again, this became effective only at the end of April. So there have been quite a bit of sales. And it's been a range of, districts and small licensees. And as I mentioned, most of those have been to T-Mobile, but, Sonic Wave has had several transactions. There are leases and sales. It's really a personal preference. It leases for the most part, and historically, those leases have been 30-year long leases because that's what the FCC allowed. There's no limit on those leases at this point in time, but so it's the idea of amortizing the payment over a 30-plus year period versus taking it all up front. And as I mentioned, most licensees don't have that opportunity to sort of go out to the market and get competing bids.
I'm sorry, can you clarify why, if they already are prior leasing them, they don't have the opportunity to put it out there for sale?
Well, not all of them, but a lot of those leases, if they've leased to T-Mobile, for example, for 30 years, a lot of those leases have restrictions that they can't sell it to any party other than their lessee.
Even at the expiration of the lease?
Yes, but most of those leases, as I mentioned, are 30-year leases. That's the limit that the FCC allowed. That limit was eliminated in April, but when the limit was raised to 30 years, most of those leases were 30-year leases.
Okay. And again, I mean, this is about approximately $2+ million to the district, so I see the value in it, but I just want to make sure we're not being short-sighted. Even if you look up when the FCC approved this, there was a lot of controversy from, I think it was the broadcast companies that didn't want that, and that's probably more of a competitive analysis. I just wonder, we own it. Is this the best way to just remove ourselves of it, or is there a long-term benefit if we retain it and lease it? So that's my question. I don't know if I really have the answer as far as the cost analysis, but that's where my outstanding question lies.
I had that same question. Why wouldn't we sublease this out for the period of 30 years? How much would we get on that rather than get the $2.3 million now? Because at the end of the 30 years, I would think, now we went from, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 now, and it's like, well, wait a minute, maybe as those bands expand, it's even worth more. So, what are these 30-year leases for? What's the dollar amount on there?
So Donna, you want to comment?
Yes, I don't think so. For the most part in these negotiations, there's not a significant difference between the leasing and the sale in terms of pricing. We look at pricing, we look at pricing in a unit called a megahertz pop. And a megahertz pop is the amount of spectrum that you have expressed in megahertz times the population that your license covers. And so whether it's a lease or a sale, we reduce it down to a megahertz pop, and we look at what it is on a megahertz pop. That's very common across all spectrum, not just EBS spectrum. And there's not a significant difference really at this point in time between the megahertz pops that are offered on a lease or a sale. So the question is, as you mentioned, sort of what's the residual value at the end of the lease, owning the asset versus selling it now. And that's something we really can't comment on, at this point in time, because, the FCC is motivated to move this spectrum over to commercial carriers. There is going to be an auction next year of spectrum, any of this spectrum that's not currently licensed in the country, there will be an auction. So that'll be another event that happens. But again, the idea is to move this toward commercial processes. So it's really, that's a decision to be made about the lease versus the sale, about the residual value. But in terms of the overall pricing, we look at the net present value of a lease, and really it's not much significant difference on the megahertz pop.
Well, I would think a difference between the sale and the lease. I mean, if you're going to get about the same amount of money, at the end of 30 years, you're still going to have it. You can release it again or sell it then.
Potentially, and I think that's also part of a larger conversation. So one of the things that I think we always need to be mindful of is what is our core business as the school district, right? And when we start getting into leases and things that are not part of our core business, frankly, we have problems monitoring, paying attention to those contracts, making sure payments are coming in. And so as you start to look at what's the overhead with managing a lease? For example, cell towers. It's a conversation we're going to have in the future, right, about cell towers. You know, we got into cell towers several years ago. Frankly, we don't manage those leases very well because it's just something we don't do as a school district. So part of the decision is taking a look at the asset. What will that look like in 30 years? We don't know. But right now, we know we've got $2.3 million that can come into the general fund that we can use for anything versus potentially the same revenue, but having to monitor that over 30 years. And we don't know what the FCC is going to do. So those are the conversations, you're exactly right, that we had over the last month or so. But I think part of that larger conversation is what do we do with the asset is being able to manage the lease and the asset over that long term becomes problematic for us at this point.
I brought forward under a previous superintendent and assistant superintendent, companies that wanted to manage those leases for us and in fact make us money and extend those leases at no cost to us. I mean, we'd actually be making money and they would handle that paperwork for us, and all we'd have to do is collect the check at the end of the month, the year, or whatever. I hope that we're still following through on some of that.
So, Ms. Brown, I'm so happy you mentioned that. It's just because we haven't found time on these really crowded agendas, but we have a whole cell tower proposal to bring with you and talk with you about how do we do this a little better. And so absolutely, whether it's in January, February.
It's making money for us, so I think we need to make time on our agenda. Okay.
If I could follow up on what Jody said too, these channels we had have not been operational since 2011. In order for us to keep this lease, we would have to make them operational, which far exceeds the $2.5 million we're receiving to get them operational, and kind of impossible for us to do in the time frame allotted. We have 6 months to make them operational.
Okay.
In this agreement, Sonic Wave has said that they would make them operational should we get to that point. So I guess the elephant in the room is we're kind of going to sell it or lose it, because I don't think we can make it operational by the time the license disappears.
You know, that speaks to kind of timing on the issue, and certainly, you know, Ms. Goodwin, your point well noted about communication and where we were, and so certainly that it falls into my responsibility. I apologize for that. However, once we had Donna on board and we learned about these timelines and time limits, trying to get to where we were has been very difficult, and we are up against a time crunch. So my apologies for that. But it's you know, I think at the end of the day, the district just does not have the technical expertise in terms of these licenses in-house, and so we had to bring that Donna on to make that happen. So certainly understand the timing issues, but that's kind of where we are, and Craig's exactly correct.
Tom?
Yeah, so as the new guy, I was a little alarmed how quickly it came to us too, but in terms of doing the due diligence that I felt I needed to do to understand this, it's not an accident that the FCC is putting a gun to our head to make a decision. The timing of all of this is because of 5G. And so suddenly our license became very valuable. And when I asked about, you know, how did this happen that we didn't lease a long time ago, Mr. Dumas gave me, and Ms. Corcoran gave me the best answer. It's not our core business. It probably wasn't paid the appropriate attention, but guess what? We're the lucky winners of that. So in all of my examination of the business and what's the best decision at this moment in time, with the FCC pulling the plug, I'm going to be supporting this. Thank you.
Bridget?
I'll close with that. I mean, I've said this a number of times tonight. That's kind of where I was saying from a cost analysis is what's our core competency. There's certainly management, and to the point of the time of what you just articulated wasn't even what I was thinking, but I don't disagree. I think we need to keep to our core competency. I just wanted to make sure we had all the information needed. So
I say this is Mitzi's fault. Mitzi was in her office wringing her hands, wishing we had more money, or was it praying we had more money? And this literally fell out of the sky.
I usually have two answers. Is it either Mitzi's or Laura's fault? I have a choice.
Yeah, well, you probably had a hand in wishing for more money, too. I'm glad we found this. I'm glad you researched it and answered our questions. And again, I'm happy it's going to help plug the hole.
Well, I want to certainly give credit to where credit's due. Certainly Craig Maniglia working in combination with Art Hardy and then bringing Donna on. They're the team that got you where you are today. So it's really due to them.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate the information. And Jody, I know you have the next item as well. The next item is student calendars. And Danielle Swede's coming up as well. We have a committee, as you know, a calendar committee, and the committee met to put together our calendars for next year and the year after. And I know that committee is made up of various different folks, and I know Danielle's going to talk about that in just a second. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Jody.
Yeah, Dr. Asplund, thank you very much. So again, on your agenda for this afternoon is to approve the advertisement of the proposed student calendars for the next two student years, school years. What I thought we would do today is have Danielle take you through, because she's really the person who took it through the committee and worked it through what you have today. So Danielle, would you take the board through kind of what that process has looked like this year?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm Danielle Schweitz, staffing administrator. Am I on? Yes. Okay. Oh, I'm so loud. You might not want that. Okay. All right. Let me know if I'm screaming. So I'm Danielle Schweitz, staffing administrator. I just wanted to share with you a little bit about what the committee looks like and the process we went through, and then you guys will have an opportunity to see the calendars, and I'll explain the next steps. So the calendar committee is comprised of an administrator, a principal that typically the school-based administrators select, or our executive directors. It's comprised of a volunteer in our schools, not necessarily a parent, but one of our stronger volunteers that wants an active role in a process. It's comprised of parents, usually a parent that is selected by the parent. Let me start again. It's a parent rep, typically a PTO president person or a SAC representative that can speak to what other parents may want to see in a calendar. A community member as well. We invite a community member to have input. The district also typically invites the school-related employee of the year, as well as the teacher of the year, so a classified person and instructional person. But then the union invites their representation as well. So it's really important to note that in our contract language, there's a piece to committees that says when the board or administration establishes district-wide committees requiring the participation of instructional and or classified bargaining unit members, such members should be chosen by the union. So they send me a list of folks that they want to participate, and then overall they give me a nod as to, looks like good representation, let's move forward. So we meet, and the goal of the committee is to come to a consensus as to student calendars. So that can be a little challenging because classified folks, instructional folks, they might have different opinions about what they think a calendar would look like best. So what we do in human resources is draft several options. We always take a minimum of 3, sometimes more. We show them, the committee, some options, and they vote, or it's not even a vote. They discuss what they like about each option. And then we try to come up with a final, which we did this year. We presented it at Cabinet to make everyone aware, with it being Dr. Asplund's first year. I wanted him to have a chance to look through all of it. Cabinet came back to us this year and said there are a few things that we think need more consideration. In the interest of student learning, Cabinet was interested in having greater time between when spring break concluded and before testing started, so students could reacclimate to being in school, have a little bit more time. And also, they wanted more equivalent time, more balanced time. There's a statute that says quarter 1 and quarter 2 should essentially be equivalent to the timeframes in quarter 3 and quarter 4. So I went back to the committee and expressed that, and they agreed that that was in the best interest of student learning. We reconfigured the calendars and came to a consensus. And that's what you all have in front of you, or you'll be voting to advertise today, which means if you say yes, we put it out for 30 days for the public to vote, comment, give feedback, parents, community members. HR will analyze all of that. We'll give it back to I almost said Dr. Brennan, Dr. Asplin and Mr. Dumas, and then we'll share that with you all. And you'll vote on that as you'll approve that calendar if you so choose, and then we'll put it out to the public.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Well, I got an earful from my grandson over the weekend complaining that he has to do his end of course exams after he comes back from the winter break. And he said, well, I'll forget everything. And I said, well, we had to do that because we started school 3 weeks late.
Correct.
And so you're doing this. We're going back to starting school earlier, the August 10th for 2021. Oh, and 2022. But the big difference is we're trying to go back to that 1 week Thanksgiving break. But what that does is to get those 90 days in, so we get the first semester in, that reduces the time before Christmas that the kids are out. As you can see in December 21, the first day, is that the 22nd, or do they go to school on the 22nd?
Yes, they do.
So the first day off in December 21 is the 23rd of December, and again in 2022. So by getting those, we could either put those 3 days in November, or you put them in December. And so this one gives that week off in December, and then we extend our winter break into the first week of January on both of these calendars. A little different. You're going to have a shorter summer break this year, of course,
Yes.
because we're staying longer, because we started later. But we're going to get back on schedule next year.
And if I may share with you, I think it might be helpful, and I neglected to share this with you. The committee did note that. There was a lot of conversation, and there really was very little pushback regarding that from the various instructional staff that offered their input. There was communication. I will say to you that a couple things we consider when we compile the drafts is there is statute that says the school year cannot start before August 10th. So we do try to start on August 10th. And the reason we try to start on August 10th is the very reason your grandson was frustrated. That's to ensure that our seniors have an opportunity, and our high school students can test before winter break. We got tremendous pushback years ago when that wasn't the case, and so we've tried to modify our calendar to suit that. I live with 2 high school students, my kids, so they are very anxious to know if this comes to fruition as well. They don't want to come home and have to test either after break. That being said, we also we give consideration to the quarter 2 finishing up before winter break, but also we take into consideration, which I think is really important, the testing window in quarter 4. We give a lot of thought to that. We don't want to conclude school before the testing window concludes. So that plays a part in how we end our school year. So there's a whole lot of other things we consider as well, but from a testing standpoint, those things are very important.
And I see we've got a 12-day break for the winter break, which might give us some wiggle room in case we have a storm or something we can come back on. But there is a long winter break in there on both calendars. We get, for our new members, we get pushback from the public when we start school on August 10th for those who have annual family get-togethers in August with their family who kids go to school up north, and the way they do it up north is they start after Labor Day. We'll get some of those calls. But then we also get, on the other hand, that there are students who need to be out in June, so that they can start programs in the colleges too.
Correct.
So this more closely follows what the community college and what the college's plan is also, so that those students who are dual enrolled, it will help them also stay in line.
Yes.
Well, we'll see how this works normally the school calendar is a hot topic.
Let's hope it is not, but it may be.
This is kind of going back to what we were doing before we got off schedule, so I didn't look at this as anything significant to really worry about. I think it's very thoughtful and it's a good calendar, but we had planned to start early because we wanted to finish that semester so that, families and our students felt free to enjoy the holiday season as opposed to worrying about coming back and taking exams. So I'm glad to see us back on track. Thank you for your efforts.
Yes, thank you. And by having the 2 years out, parents can make their plans, as can teachers and staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Danielle and Jody. Appreciate that. And board, just a reminder, this is an action item, a new business item today on the board meeting for you to vote upon. And remember, it's to vote to advertise it for 30 days. All right, our next item is outside field trips, and Jody was going to speak to us about that.
Thank you. Certainly, one of the conversations we have quite often, not only at Cabinet, but with principals as well, is talking about what are we going to be doing under COVID and what are we not going to be doing under COVID? How quickly do we continue to open? Do we hold back? And certainly that's a conversation I know we all struggle with, especially as, the uptick in numbers are out there and we're coming off Thanksgiving holiday and going into winter break. So recently, one of the conversations that came up and we were asked by a few principals is, what about outside field trips? Specifically talking about the large field trip I think a great many of our schools do every year is going out to Marina Jack and doing the Celebrating Our Differences field trip, which is very valuable, certainly, and something we've done for years. So I believe this conversation was around allowing schools to go out, if they wish, to go out and do that particular field trip, as well as others that may be outside. About a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, we had an opportunity to talk with principals across the district about just what are they thinking, what are they getting from teachers, what are they getting from parents, and I would say it really was a mixed message from principals all across the board, as you could kind of guess. Certainly, some principals feel like staff is ready to start taking some outside field trips. Others feel like maybe we need to continue to wait. So really, there wasn't a clear message about what principals thought was important at this point with field trips, specifically outside field trips. Dr. Kingsley, I know as we were discussing this the other day, Dr. Kingsley does know the members who are putting on the Celebrating Our Differences field trip for everybody out at Marina Jack, and she did confirm the other day that this is going to be offered as a virtual field trip for all schools from now through at least the start of March, I believe, and then they'll be considering an option where there could be buses and students go out to Marina Jack, but at this point there are going to be options for classes to do this field trip online. So a very unique way to kind of still celebrate what's going on and learn from it and not have to expose potential issues with COVID-19. Certainly, as we talk about field trips, that's part of the conversation is we'd love to make that happen. We're busing kids every day. We certainly feel like we could bus kids to an outside field trip. The problem becomes we'd have to be very careful with that so we're not mixing schools, we're not mixing grades as much as possible. One of the things I know schools have done a great job of is to try as much as possible to keep kids in groups together, not mixing across campus as much as possible. And so when we get into a field trip environment, certainly we could do that, but there are potential risks with mixing students from schools and schedules and all of that. And then certainly contact tracing is a challenge for us every day. And I would, if we get into a field trip situation where we've got a potential exposure on a field trip, it would be a large challenge to contact trace that and make sure we were excluding students that we need to exclude. So certainly a lot of things to consider as we talk about outside field trips, but at least for the one that I think we were going to talk about today, I think there's a great option online for schools across the district.
And another thing that we were talking about, where we were talking, in October, things were going well, our numbers were coming down, and now we're reversed that. So I think the whole condition is a little different than it was 2 weeks ago. What we left it in the air regarding leasing the facilities. And, is that something that's off the table again with the numbers where they're at, or have you made any movement on that?
Yes, we moved forward with what the board, I think, asked us for at that time, which was allowing small rentals to happen. Number one, we opened it up under specific guidelines. I think that we heard from the board. One, it's at the principal's prerogative on if they think they can have that rental at their site, socially distance, and maintain proper COVID-19 protocols. So that's first and foremost. Every principal can, at their site, can say yes or no on the rentals. We have a whole protocol in place in our Facilitron rental process that's got our COVID-19 guidelines. They have to sign off a waiver to say they understand that it's COVID-19. Same type of protocols we use in the district. There has to be masking, limit 25% capacity of the space you're renting, social distancing. So all of those are kind of built into our process at this point. So yes, we have opened, but we've opened I would say on a soft opening with small rentals and only where a principal felt like they could handle that capacity on their campus at that particular point.
Yeah, so I would think like those concerts and things that they have, the 25% capacity just wouldn't make it feasible for them.
That's absolutely correct. Those are the types of things we did not want to have happen. I think a lot of the openings you're going to start to see are rentals for aftercare programs, things like that on different campuses that happened. And again, we want to encourage that if at all possible, certainly options for parents and students. If, like I said, if the principal can make sure that, there's not 5 rentals on campus, so now we're crowding kids into one area. So it's certainly something that needs to be looked at, each rental individually, and can we accommodate it? But again, trying to do what we can to accommodate renters and keeping everybody safe with the COVID-19 protocols in place.
Okay, Jane?
I've had a number of people who have asked me about this, and some of them were for small field trips. But I think that my take is that we shouldn't do field trips at this time. Maybe not at all this year, and I think that's sad to say, but certainly not with the numbers increasing as they are now. The hospitals are full. Our COVID units at Sarasota Memorial are full. Hospitals in South County, Inglewood, and Venice are full. And I think, it's not good what's happening in this county. If you look at the recent data, it's a big concern to all of us, and it's going to get worse. We're afraid we don't have the numbers from Thanksgiving travel yet. So I would be hesitant to do that. Just the fact of traveling on a bus, as you said, and keeping, or however transportation works, and keeping the small groups together, it is a liability we don't need to take at this time.
I know that some of the, I think their individual teachers are working with the international travel in the summer. And I'm talking to my grandson, and they've got some trip planned. And I says, I think you probably got less than a 50% chance of going. And he goes, we understand that. And there's a $99 application fee that we won't get back. But everything else is fully refundable if the conditions exist. And I didn't want to burst his bubble, but I said, there's a lot of things that would have to change between now and in June before you would be able to even consider taking that. And will those have to be approved by the district if they do those?
We approve everything, but go ahead, Jody.
So I think, and I don't know if Mr. Cantis is in the room anymore, but I think that in cases like those out of the country trips, we've specifically said that they're not school district sponsored, and that the parents know that it's their own choice to go on that field trip, and we're not coordinating that. And I think that's been our stance up until this point. Now, whether whether we move forward and there's a vaccine and things change, if that our stance changes, I think we can reevaluate as we always are. But I think at this point, that's where we've been is, we're not supporting that. We're not sponsoring that. That certainly would be a parent decision outside of the school district supporting that type of international travel at this point.
Yeah, but I would caution any teacher who's trying to put something like that together, rather than getting kids' hopes up. But we'll see what happens. I mean, because we don't know what it's like in those countries. I mean, we might get the vaccine, but they might not. And then we all know countries will close.
And just, like Jody said, as far as the school district is concerned, I think we try to stay away from that, And if a teacher does do something on their own, it definitely does need to be something on their own. But I hear what you're saying too is not that we make that decision for them, or not that we as a school district can make a personal decision for them, but to talk through that with them so they understand, if you do take a group out of the country, number one, the risk, and then number two, the quarantine that might have to happen and the timing of it and all those things need to be thought of, because then it does affect the school system, even though it's not part of the school system. But we do need to be very careful, whether we're in COVID or not, really allowing anything through the school district that would be out of the country, in my opinion, and past experience in that case. And even having meetings on our campuses regarding that type of a trip is something that we do not want to do.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jody.
The next item doesn't even have your name next to it, Jody.
No, it does not.
Yeah. Well, way to go. Well, thank you for all you're doing. And I know that working with the Department of Health and coordinating all of that kept you busy before. And I guess just when you were catching your breath, it's you're having to work harder again.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's constantly changing. And so our teams that are doing the contact tracing, Susie DeBose, that Aaron Singerman, that whole team of people is really to credit for what's going on in the school district. And this afternoon, I know Michael Drennan is going to give an update with Dr. Asplin, as we do every board meeting. And we're going to talk a little bit about some modified quarantine dates, as you've probably read in the news. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Jody. Appreciate it. Okay, so next would be our meeting work session models, procedures having to do with our board meetings and so forth. And I know there was a question, or there's been a thought that maybe we need to make a change to how we run each of our monthly board meetings / workshops, and how many we have, and the calendar associated with that. I know I gave you 4 different recommendations having to do with this issue, and just wanted to open it up for conversation to see what you're most comfortable with. I personally, myself, I'm most comfortable with having 1 board meeting per month and 2 workshops. Gives us an opportunity to have 2 workshops, have a lot of items to be able to debate, work through, really contemplate what we're doing before we put it on a board packet for a vote. And it gives us more time each month to figure out exactly what it is that we are putting out for a vote, and to be able to have you discuss it properly and have a really, really good feeling behind it and before you vote. So that's just my opinion. And like I said, there's 3 other options on here. So I'd like to open it up and just see what you'd like to do.
Well, maybe I should let other people talk first. I see, especially with Dr. Asplin on and 2 new board members, that there definitely is an opportunity to have another board meeting. If it's the Tuesday afternoon when we have the Tuesday evening meeting. I don't know if logistically if 1 meeting a month would work, because there's contracts and things that have to be approved. So I would like to maybe keep that option open to have that first Tuesday evening meeting available, but I definitely would like to see the 2 workshops. We can always cancel it if we don't have anything to talk about, but personally, I think especially if we're looking at our strategic plan, I don't want to see our strategic plan being done remotely I want to see some of that information that we're doing shared more locally with our district.
Right.
And with our employees and with our public. So I want to see us dig deeper into those things. And I think that you want to make some changes too. And so I want to hear those. I want to dig down into those and have a better understanding of where we are. And I think that would be good for our community too, and definitely for our board. The FSBA conference, there was, these are available if you didn't attend the conference, didn't attend the workshops. There was one on running a meeting, and there was another one on the parliamentary procedures. But the one on running a meeting I thought was very good. They said a board meeting is to do the work of the district. The superintendent puts together an agenda. I get to sit in on that meeting and make approvals. And then we get to vote on these things. A lot of it is on the consent agenda. We're fortunate that we have our agenda is made where the motions are even written right out there, that what we have to do. So you work on the agenda. We shouldn't be having surprises. We have to publish that agenda. We have to let the public know what we're voting on. That's why we don't bring things up at the board that we haven't discussed before. And Dr. Brennan wants to take it a step further and saying, no, we don't want to have a workshop in the morning like we had that on the communication thing and then have to vote on it in the afternoon. We want to have a meeting where we can discuss it in a board workshop and public can hear about it and then come back at a future board meeting and vote on it. I think that's good. I think we also had talked about changing the little card to say what item it is you're talking about. Are you going to talk about a general issue? And then getting information so that we can reach out to these people if they have concerns. You know, if it's about a certain school, that we can let the principal know that this person came up. Because if they're here with a problem, we want to make sure that their issues are handled. So we're looking at making some changes on the card. Maybe we can bring that back at a future meeting when we look at it. But we want to get some input first before we make those changes. I did get some feedback from some, in fact, I think one of the women that were here at the last meeting said, I think that would be good to have the school on there. And let's see, Bridget.
Thank you. Well, I certainly concur on the aspect of, as best as possible, to have any items that need to be discussed at a workshop and you vote on it at a subsequent meeting. I think that's just best practice. While there may be some outlier circumstances that are urgent, that's not certainly the standard that we would see. That's not the norm. You know, and I would not be opposed to marking the option of an additional workshop, and in the event we don't have enough to fill it, then we could cancel it. But I think that just for everyone's scheduling and for the public's benefit, that in advance of saying, here's that placeholder, and in the event there's nothing, then we cancel it. I go back and forth on the meeting part, and it's interesting. I've looked at other school districts, and many actually have gone down to one meeting. My only challenge with that is that because I do like the format where we have one 3 o'clock meeting and one 6 o'clock meeting, because from the public standpoint, I think everyone's schedules are a bit different. So it does afford them the opportunity to attend a meeting at least in a month at a different time that may accommodate their schedule. Obviously, we can't accommodate everyone's schedule, but I think it provides that opportunity. So, you know, I'm for the additional workshops as needed, and if we want to mark those in, that just allows for more continuity. I thank the superintendent for reiterating the necessity of any items that are coming before us that may need to be workshopped, that we do it in a manner that's not the day of the meeting that we're being requested to take a vote. And so I guess my only concern is if we move to one a month, is one, the timing, as I mentioned, but also the limitation of, you have to, all contracts, which can be done, by the way, that everything has to be kind of fast-paced and in advance so that we're not behind at all. So, so I'll defer to my other board members. Right now, I do like that we have 2 different meetings. I'm all for additional workshops, especially as we talk about the strategic plan and having, there are a lot of items that we have. So I appreciate the different options, but those are my concerns.
And another thing I'd like to be able to get back to after COVID is to be able to have a South County meeting every year.
I was going to actually mention that and ask about, what, is that an option? I know county, for example, they're not doing they're staying in one location, but I do think it is important if we can to do one South County, one North County to be accessible, but.
At least in 2022, we should be able to, sometime in 2021. Jane?
I have a question first. So Dr. Asplin, better known as Dr. Brennan,
I keep calling him.
I would like to know, so you would recommend 2 workshops on, let's say, the first and second, and then when would you recommend the one board meeting?
So there were a couple of different options that I put on here. One of them was a little bit of what Ms. Ziegler said, which was if you still have a board meeting and a workshop on the first Tuesday of the month, just because you're all here, we could do that as long as whatever we talk about in the workshop isn't what's going to be on that board meeting that night. And we just need to make sure that that information gets placed on the next board pack. Gives us time to process. And then another option would be you'd be adding another day to the month if you do 2 workshops and then have a board meeting separate from those 2 days. So either way, I think for us, or for me, having the workshop and the board meeting on the same day is fine, as long as those are the items that are on the next board meeting, so that gives me time to, because I honestly, sometimes I feel kind of rushed on it. So for instance, when Danielle was talking about the calendar issue, what if in here something came up that was a big issue and then all of a sudden it's on the board packet and people are coming tonight already thinking that you're going to do it. If we pull it, now it's kind of late and people are coming, they think they're going to see something. So there's logistics problems there. And then even this Thursday is the agenda review for the next board meeting. And that agenda review, that's fine. But when I sit down in that agenda review, I might see things that I haven't even talked about with our folks yet because I've been dealing with all these other 5 things that we did this week. And we haven't had time to truly discuss it, the areas that we need to discuss to even put on the board agenda for me to then tell you and explain to you what that is. So that gives me at least another week to be able to get some more information to then explain to you properly so you can make a good decision.
Well, the reason I asked that is because I was curious about what your ideas were, or what you felt would be a reasonable idea. And for me, I would like to try going to 2 workshops and 1 board meeting. And here's my reason why. And it would have to be at night so that it would be convenient to parents. Although I think 6:30 is late, I think we could start it a little bit early. I know a lot of parents that would like to come on their way home, as opposed to going home and then coming back and, all that. So that could be, the logistics of that could be worked out. But my concern is workshop and the fact that we don't have enough time to talk together. And it's always rushed, and I'm thinking, why did you put this on, not necessarily just since you've been superintendent, but why is this on the agenda when I don't need to know it? I mean, we could beat the dead horse about the calendar, but I pretty much knew about the calendar. It's pretty close to what we've done before. So that kind of thing. But the fact that we don't have enough time, I mean, I have some things, because I'm involved in other associations and other organizations and around the community, that I'd like to be able to share with the board, and I never have time to share them. And if I had Kathy distribute, as I say, it goes into deep, dark hole because you haven't heard anything about it yet. You've got a lot of stuff on your plate. If, like me, you've got as many things in your boxes as we do, you say, oh, well, this is from Jane. We'll just forget about reading this or going over this, and that's okay. But I would like to see us go to that. I'd like to have 2 meaningful workshops where we did have enough time to chat, not on the same day. And then the thing for parents that I'm thinking, and this is just based on my knowledge of those that come to see us, and we have somebody in the audience that comes a lot, and thank you for that. I would like to say, I think it would be helpful and positive for parents if we just had one meeting a month, because I've heard parents say to me, well, why do we have 2 meetings? Or I didn't get to that meeting at 3:30 because I work, or, that's not convenient. We would have things that was in a meaningful, it may be longer, but a meaningful situation, a meaningful meeting, and the parents then would be able to be here if it were important to them, or watch on Zoom. We may have to go back to Zoom, folks, if, things do get worse in terms of COVID. We may have to look at having Zoom meetings again. But basically, I would like us to try this. I think there's merit in doing it. I think we'd be much more thoughtful, much more connected if we had 2 workshops. And then for parents, I think they'd have the ability of seeing that, or witnessing, or being here for that one board meeting a month, and that might be a good thing for them as well. They've got lots of other ways to spend their time, so they might enjoy that as well.
Perhaps the 6:30 meeting could switch to a 6:30 workshop, or a 6 o'clock, so that they could see us doing the work of the board, because that's where we do the work. Not so much at the board meeting, but, so we'd have an afternoon and an evening workshop, and have the afternoon.
Well, the only other thing on that is just remember, there might be 20, 25 staff members who I bring in here for a workshop to really get into it and into.
That's true.
And I don't know how available they would be every.
That's true. Okay. Tom?
Yes, my observation even before joining the board is that there just isn't enough time, and often people are rushed in the workshop to get an answer out, and sometimes not in the most pleasant of ways. So if we have a little time to reflect and think about our thoughts before we're just rushed to get it out. So I am all for two workshops. And the other piece of this, having them also on separate days, is I really do enjoy hearing from my board members. I enjoy hearing their thoughts about a particular issue, and it gives me time to go home and reflect those thoughts and take them into consideration. And I think that's an important part of us getting to consensus. So I'm all for that. And the last piece of why I think that's a good idea too is we're not strategic. Almost everything that we're doing here is reaction, particularly because of COVID, and we're moving fast and we're reacting. We're having, and we have such wonderful minds here. We have wonderful talent. We're not taking advantage of that to think about what we can do to even be better. So I'd like to give ourselves the time to do that. And in terms of one board meeting, I think it forces us to be more efficient at that board meeting and to make sure that we're sticking to a timeline and getting through those conversations because we have had time to think about it. And the last part of it is if we need another one, we can always call it.
It's true. That is true. We can call a special meeting if we need to, especially when you were talking about contracts, Ms. Ziegler. If we had to, we could do that as well. That's true.
Karen?
I want to reinforce the 2 workshops, and I think it's exemplary to have a priority to not have a workshop and then go immediately into a school board and vote. I think we will be a lot more respected for transparency and the community being able to see a process as it flows. I'm not against one board meeting a month. I look at the piece as of in recent months that we've had a lot of families that come in, and I hesitate right now based on the fact that I don't want there to be a perception that we're trying to eliminate their ability to have that input. However, we've talked today about parent empowerment, and I also believe that addressing the board in the manner that has occurred in the last few months isn't necessarily being perceived as an empowerment. So how do we provide that empowerment and in a way that our community and our families feel heard, respected, and acknowledged. And I don't know that's necessarily in a board meeting, but I don't want our community to misconstrue that the pieces that have occurred in the last few months with how our communication has rolled out from families to us. I would like to find ways to empower them that aren't necessarily in the format that's occurred, that I don't feel like they have felt like they're getting a lot from it. So how do we balance those two pieces? Family input, parent input, and have it be productive for them, and not have one board meeting a month perceived as impacting that communication.
Mr. Hardy would like some input.
I just wanted to throw out a couple of thoughts. First, you have very broad discretion in how many meetings you have. The statutory requirement is you must have one a month. So obviously no one's talking about fewer than that. So you have to have at least one a month. Whether you have more or not is up to you. Workshops, you can have them every day or never. That's also up to you. The timing of them, when you have those meetings, obviously completely up to you. I would just remind the board, and this is not an impediment, it's just a detail, that you have already adopted a schedule of meetings for this year, so that you can change that whenever you want to change that, but you have to remember to change that. So if you make a decision to go to one meeting or to change in any way the meetings that you've already established, you absolutely can do it. You just have to remember to formally do it, because you have to set the schedule of your meetings. So I just wanted to remind the board of that.
Bridget?
Thank you. Well, so two notes, and I agree with Mrs. Rowe's comments that, again, that perception, I understand. First of all, I'm glad we agree on the workshop, so that's a win. And I do think there's going to be a lot of value to that moving forward. I do worry about the access and ability for the public to come and speak. I know we even talked about the length of time and maybe restructuring our meetings in a manner where the first public, open to the public would be specific to the agenda, and then the action items take place, we vote, and then at the end of that meeting, we could open up to general items that affords those who are there to speak on something that action is going to be taken, have primary, and I think I've seen that model work in other districts and other government entities, and I think that makes a lot of sense. On the card, they would cite what specified agenda item that is. I know I'd mentioned I've cautioned about asking for too much information because I don't want to hinder people. We want them to come speak, and even if it is something of a manner where we just need to be able to be accessible. So if we're consolidating down to one meeting, that may make it almost so long that we're preventing again, I go back and I reflect, not always when we have hour-long public comment is it actually even on anything that's on the agenda. But in the perception standpoint too is if we're going to double up and have one meeting, there could potentially be substantial public comment, and then we're running into very late meetings and et cetera. So I wouldn't be opposed to it in the future, but perhaps right now it may not make sense. We'll start with those two workshops we start rolling on. And to Mr. Hardy's point of, if in the event we think, hey, we can get the business of the board done in efficiently and also in a transparent way to have accessibility to the public in one meeting, then we change it accordingly. That would be my request and suggestion.
I also think that currently we have information that we present at board meetings. When we're giving the A+ schools or the recognitions. I think we've got something about the circus. We've got Embracing Our Difference later in the month. And some of those things that we put on. And I think perhaps if we have nothing else to put on a meeting to vote, to at least just put out there what we're doing in some of our schools. I'm not ready to give up that second meeting yet either, but definitely open for the workshop. And we can see if we can put all of the work on one, but let's look at that. Brennan, I think you're next.
Just to answer that, there was the fourth option, the fourth recommendation, which that one is a board meeting and a work session, and then another board meeting and work session. So it'll be 4 in 1 month. As long as at the work session, we're not talking about that particular meeting.
Exactly.
But that's another option. But the other item I did want to bring up that did come up in our conversations. I did talk about it in cabin. I wanted to see how the staff felt about it and how it will help us and so on. And there were a few things that would help us definitely by spreading it out a little bit and being able to talk about it more. But one of the items was having one board meeting a month. What does that do to our hiring process? So, when you're hiring and a person's going to start, and let's say that, we have our board meeting today, and tomorrow we hire a person, we want them to start in a week because they can, and then we want to pay them before they're able to be approved by you in the January meeting. And I think the question didn't come up as much about salary because we've done that in the past, but it was more about benefits. But then when I looked into that, it was, the conversation that I've had with a couple of my HR colleagues from other areas in the state was, the non-pro-tunc, and I talked to Art about this a little bit, the fact that we do approve certain items after the fact is okay, and even with wages being paid, that's okay, and pension, or not pension, but benefits. Benefits, really, if we look at that the same as salary and wages, then it also could be approved on the back side. We would just be offering benefits and we'd be offering salaries for a month before it was actually approved. And in talking with Art and a couple other attorneys from other parts of the state, the question they've asked me is, well, can you remember ever a time where the board didn't approve somebody? Because for a board member not to approve somebody on the agenda, it would have to be for cause to be hired, and that just doesn't happen that often. And if it ever did, then we could deal with that situation later. So as far as having one board meeting because of that reason, I think we're okay with that. But listening to what you're saying, Ms. Ziegler and Ms. Brown, I understand what you're saying as well. You kind of want to ease into it if we go to one. I think what'll happen is if we begin to have, if we start to have 2 workshops a month, we're going to solve so many problems that I think one board meeting a month is going to be okay because we're going to be proactive, like Mr. Edwards said, more proactive to where we'll feel okay about that. And then if we need another one, we can always call one. But I'm not opposed. I'm whatever you all want to do, but I think we could make that work if we did 2 and 2 in the first couple of months, see how it works, and kind of ease our way into it if that's the goal. But it's whatever you all want to do.
Yeah, thank you. Karen?
I just want to go slow with it. We're in the height of the coronavirus, and our communication has expected challenges from a multitude of community groups and perspectives. And in normal times and traditionally, we're using school board meetings to highlight the incredibly positive, wonderful accomplishments of students, student groups, and schools, and that's something that I would like to know that we have also the time to emphasize as we go forward. That's essentially what we're about. I just think that making a change in all the different kinds of perceptions of why we're making it, we have to be extraordinarily careful with right now, and also know that for years, those 2 board meetings focused in on some incredible accomplishments of staff that is coming forward, but also students, schools, and groups and families cherished those moments of being recognized by the superintendent on our education channel and by the board. So I think there's a lot to think about. I don't rule it out. I just think there's a lot to be careful with.
Yeah, I like those recognitions that we do. And I also, if you can see on your proposed calendar for 2021, one of the things we've done in March, we're not meeting on the 3rd Tuesday right now. We're meeting on the 4th Tuesday because of spring break. And right now, this workshop shows, the schedule shows no workshops in July. I'd like to at least pencil one in. I mean, because we've got all the budget stuff, and sometimes that budget just drops on us. Wait a minute, you made these changes, and we didn't hear about the budget, and now we have to be voting on it. So I think we ought to put that July workshop in. And so if we add a workshop, I would like to see that we add it on the first Tuesday and potentially in the afternoon. Maybe we can get some nods, yes or no, or.
No, I agree.
So what you're saying is still have the two board meetings.
I think we're still having the two board meetings for now.
And then add another board workshop per month so that we have two, because my big thing is I really feel like we need to have two board workshops for sure.
So the first Tuesday in the afternoon, a workshop. I don't think we need the whole day, and I don't think we want to come in the morning and then come back in the evening.
Right.
Some people have to come a long way.
Thank you.
So we'll be looking at afternoon workshops to start, 1, 2, 3 o'clock. We have to put something on the agenda.
Okay.
We have to notice.
So let me make sure I'm clear. So it'd be a workshop and a board meeting on the same day, twice a month, right? Okay.
But the stuff that we have on the workshop on the first Tuesday, we vote on the third Tuesday.
I hope I'm not making this more difficult.
Okay, we just have to kind of pencil in a time, if you would let us. We'll put something out there, and then we'll also make some changes to the card, and we'll bring back for you to look at. What we were also looking at on the agenda, to have the people speak to agenda items up front, and then the other issues on the back. Now, there was some frustration because they're saying they're not empowered, we don't get to speak. I mean, maybe we have board members that are frustrated too that they don't get to speak. Maybe if we give each member of the public their 3 minutes to speak, maybe at the end of the meetings, we encourage each board member to speak for 3 minutes, and they can talk about what they're doing in the community. They can talk about what they'd like us to be doing in the future, what they have done.
No.
I knew Jane was going to say
You're the one who
that.
wanted to talk.
No. What do you
I
want
think
this
each
to
of
be
us are
over at
empowered
3 in the
equally.
morning? I mean, are we empowering, what is this? At the end of a board meeting, then we're going to have, who knows how many people speak, and I'm all for their speaking.
No, I'm talking about board members speak. Board member, just think about that, yes, you can have a time to speak, because you're saying.
It's already there.
And you want to be able to talk, or do you want to talk in
The
those?
stuff that I need are workshop
workshops.
type stuff. I'm not interested in speaking at the end of the meeting. Plus, what time is it now? If this started at 6:30, are we talking about midnight, 3 o'clock? What? I mean, if we had a lot of people that was speaking at the end due to an issue, then we're going to speak for 3 minutes. We're going to each have 3 minutes.
No, not after each one, at the very end.
No, I mean at the very end, but that's another 15 minutes, right?
It's 15 minutes, yes.
How
Or you
about as
can waive
needed?
that time.
Okay.
Okay, Tom, or Karen, did you get your second comment in?
I don't think I had a cue in. However, I just want to say I don't know how valuable it is for us to address comments relative to the feedback we're getting from speakers, as much as it is just we're going to get back to some normalcy eventually and be out in the community and have real exchange, I think is the key.
True.
Agreed.
And like I said, a lot of this, what we talked about earlier this morning, they should be having these conversations in their schools, and perhaps the schools can allow for that. And Tom?
Okay, so somewhere I'm a little off track, I think. I was a proponent of 2 workshops and 1 meeting that were not on the same day. They were 3 separate days, so that, or in theory, I mean, there's a little flexibility obviously there to have 1 day where there's a workshop and a board meeting. But the idea for me would be that the workshops are comfortable relaxed and the ability to converse publicly amongst ourselves and to share ideas. I feel like even trying to switch agenda, like we're going to talk about one workshop and then, but not that at the meeting that day, that, it's a little herky-jerky in style to me, but I'm flexible. I want to reiterate that I am flexible. But I would prefer having the time for us to just be able to talk and then go back and think about it, reflect on it, and then bring that to the board meeting, because there might be more continued discussion about that particular topic before you go ahead and make your vote. So I'm still a proponent of 2 and 1, because if we get to a point of taking something away and saying, well, we don't need that second board, I'd rather add because we need it. Looks like we're serving the public's need, which in that particular case it would be. And I think we could do a little better being more efficient. I just throw that back out there. We will absorb the time if we give it to ourselves that way. So I'm just hoping that we can just reflect those 2 workshops as a time to do work, really.
The problem with taking away one board meeting is taking away that public access, because the people can't speak at a workshop. And then if we do take away one board meeting, would we be taking away the 6:30 board meeting or the 3 o'clock board meeting? Because there's a big difference. And so perhaps our 6:30 meeting might be light agenda. I'm not ready to get rid of that yet. Bridget?
I agree. I think it's something to strive for, as I said before. I think, having been in chair and understanding the agenda review process and understanding how clunky that can kind of be, especially when you're planning, if you're saying, okay, and I wholeheartedly agree that and I know I've heard my other colleagues say this as well, as much as possible, having it a best practice that nothing be put on the agenda that we're workshopping that same day. I know each department kind of knows what that cyclical things are going, and to be fair to you and the chair, knowing what those are in advance, almost a little bit before agenda review, so you're almost pre-planning for that next workshop to avoid that. And I know Kathy does a really great job there too. And that just, again, I think that's going to help that cycle, and we don't want to be here longer just for the sake of being here. I can't disagree enough, and I know Mrs. Goodwin will agree with me there too. So as we look at and build those agendas, having a sense of, do we need 4-hour, two 4-hour workshops, et cetera? Maybe not. As placeholders, I can tell you it helps me from a scheduling standpoint, but certainly from the public standpoint too. So I see what Mr. Edwards is saying, and I do think there's an opportunity as we move forward. But I do, as Mrs. Rose said, I think we got to be cautious of the accessibility and even just the optics. And we certainly, that's not our goal, but at the current moment, I think 2 and 2 is a good start.
So, some of us remember when there were no public comments and very few people in the audience. And it's surprising when that happens, is when we're voting on the budget usually.
No.
But I believe if we keep we add the workshops to the agenda, but keep the meetings on the agenda, and then if they're not needed, and you can start showing, oh, we don't have anything new, I don't have anything in the superintendent's report that I have to present, we can cancel a meeting, correct? If we give notice?
The board has to take action to cancel a meeting. You can do that.
So we would know the meeting 2 weeks before.
The board would have to take action to cancel a meeting. I mean, you couldn't the day before say we're not,
right.
You wouldn't be together to do that.
And I think the amount of time that, it's a process. It takes a while to create a board meeting.
Well, in fact,
just to say we're going to shut it down is difficult.
We have a meeting on Tuesday, and then on Thursday, we have an agenda meeting for the meeting that's 2 weeks later.
Right.
We would know on that Tuesday if we're not going to be having the agenda meeting, because there's nothing to discuss. So we could, say, if it was the first Tuesday and we knew we didn't have anything else, we could cancel the third Tuesday meeting at that meeting. I mean, I think you would know ahead of time.
So what you're saying is then, as items come in, I would look at the urgency and be able to say, this one can wait and go on the once a month, and if they're all doing that, then that's when we say, okay, well, maybe we don't need that other one any longer.
Yes.
But if there's something that's urgent, then we would have one at that point in time.
Yeah, because you would know at the one meeting, because you're going to be
Yeah.
setting up the agenda 2 days later.
Right.
The preliminary agenda, so I think we could at that time cancel.
I think
And let's
here's
see
I
what you're
think.
taking
I
out.
think that the best way is to have, and I'm not saying we're going to do this because you guys decide, but the best way is to have one meeting and 2 workshops a month, I think. However, I completely understand easing into it possibly, or seeing what the reaction from our constituents are, because they're used to coming every 2 weeks. And maybe we do need to kind of wean off of that if possible. If not, we'll know because everybody will show up. But I think what'll happen is, even our last board meeting didn't have as many speakers. And I think, it depends on what's going on. And if we have a hot topic or a hot thing going on, we might need a couple that month, and we call a special meeting, or we have another one. But I think as we move along, we're going to find two things. I think our board meeting, even though it's once a month, is actually going to be short because they're going to do so much in the workshops that they're going to be consent agenda mainly, unless you have something hot that you need to put on the new business. And then I think speakers will probably, not as many speakers will come unless it depends on that hot topic that happens to be that time. So I foresee it, especially as Karen said, as things kind of level out a little bit, so to speak. I think we're going to go to a more consent agenda type meeting, because we're going to have so much workshop time and less people wanting to come in and speak about things. But that's just my opinion.
And I just want to keep in mind our tradition of student and school recognition and sharing the best practices that are occurring, and
Right.
and board and superintendent recognition. I consider that a high priority, and how does that fit into the schedule, or how is it replaced? Essentially, I feel like
We
that.
could also do that at a workshop, perhaps. You can't. Okay, Jane?
I just started out with this with wanting 2 workshops on a separate day from board meetings, because I think we don't give ourselves enough time to chat. And I think a lot of boards are feeling that same pressure. There's an awful lot that you need to talk about. That was really my beginning intention, was that we would have 2 workshops. I don't care what day they're on, but they're separate days, and that they start in the morning and maybe they go all day. That to be determined, but I think we need more workshop time. I'd really prefer it not to be on the day of a board meeting, because I think that's where we got ourselves into the position now of rush, is we're trying to get ready for that 3 o'clock meeting. Most of our parents, most of our recognition of schools happen on the 6:30 board meeting. That's when majority of the parents say they're able to come. Most of them are not able to come in the afternoons, and they'll reflect on that sometimes and say, see, I came, but I really don't have the time to come because I had to take off from work. So I think whatever we do of a board meeting needs to be when people are available, and I think 6:30, we could possibly start an hour earlier at 5:30. But I would really like our workshops to be 2, and I'd like them to be on separate days, so that we have the full intention of doing a workshop for that day, and we're not squeezing that in around other things. And then we have our dear friend here, Mr. Hardy, who very often has, issues with, shall we say, litigation meetings and that sort of thing, which also we try to fudge in on the, pull in on the same day. So it's like, tossing balls in the air, and I think the workshop gets the short shift. So that's
I think if we add a second workshop, that'll take up some of that. So, we could have the workshop on the Tuesday when we have the 6:30 meeting. We could have an afternoon workshop, or we could have a full-day workshop, depending upon what's needed. I would rather see it stay, and that's because we're not going to, if we're having information on the workshop, we're not going to be voting on it that day. But we have a whole day that, if we had to, we could start at 9 a.m. and work till 5.
And then have a board meeting that goes till midnight?
We don't have any board meetings that go to midnight.
No, but I mean, we optionally could have, I mean, who knows?
Well, if something comes up, we can make changes to that. But that, I mean, I don't think we've ever had a meeting where public comment went more than an hour, hour and a half. But I personally would rather keep it on the 2 days, because there's other things that come up on your schedule that that you end up plugging in and make plans for.
So, Mr. Hardy, is this something that once we decide, it becomes something that the board votes on to change?
Well, if the board wants to change its schedule of regular meetings, then the board needs to vote on it.
Vote on it, right.
You can schedule workshops as long as you publicly notice them whenever you want to schedule workshops.
So right now, we're going to keep the board meetings as they are.
I feel like we're split, and I just want to make sure that we have consensus.
It's the workshop
'Cause this
for-
is something that we need to have consensus on, because either that, or I would say then we would just keep it the way it is, because it seems like we all need to have consensus on this one. And we're
I
not
think we have
voting, we're just
consensus in the additional workshop.
Yes.
Yes. Is there, everybody agrees with the extra
Yes.
workshop? Yes. Okay. So does everybody agree with, for right now, keeping both meetings there until you see how things work? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right.
Yes, with the potential of going in the future to cancel the meetings if we don't need them.
Okay.
But are you saying do the 2 workshops on the same day as board meetings?
Yeah, I mean, because the one workshop, the meeting doesn't start till 6:30. You've got the whole day. Right now, we don't have a whole day. And we've had workshops that started at 1 in the afternoon. And that's why some things got stuck. I mean, if we have workshops that we schedule at 9.
And you can go home in the afternoon because you don't have to come back till 6:30. I cannot do that. I have to stay here the whole day and into the evening because it's too far for me to go. So that's a different story. But I just think that it's overtaxing to spend that long of a day. And for me, maybe it's at my senior age, it is too long and too taxing. I would rather have workshops on a separate day.
Well, I would think we could schedule a workshop, tentatively schedule the workshops at 1 o'clock when we have the evening meetings.
May I offer a suggestion? Because I think what Mrs. Goodwin's saying, I do understand there are days, especially reflecting on the decisions we've had to make with COVID and how serious they are. And I mean, and these are big decisions. So when meetings, for whatever reason, the agenda is long and the workshop's long and then the meeting's long, but if there are items, I mean, this is where the discretion, in my opinion, and as we work, hopefully continue to work collegially together, is if there is an item that's taking a lot of time or that we feel that the day has gone long, I mean, we have the ability to table things, move them to the next one, and as long as it's not disrupting the operations of the district. But I think Mrs. Goodwin's saying is well taken. I do, on the flip side, get concerned of if we're going to have multiple workshops, which I do believe will be beneficial. And I think Mr. Edwards made a good point about this allows us to really be proactive versus reactive. And that in time, I believe if we find that we are more efficient, we may be able to very well go to one meeting. And at the current moment, if we add these additional workshops, it's incumbent upon the chair and the superintendent to evaluate what's on there. And if there's a day where it's just getting very long, and I've seen multiple boards do this again, that they'll table an item or they'll recess and go back to another time. It really just comes down to the operations if that's not disruptive. But I think to try to cement it right now with some unknowns, I think is going to be challenging, but being cognizant of the long days and the decisions that we have to make, it is in our benefit to be, alert and reflect on what was said. And so if we find that can't take place that day, I think we should be, somewhat supportive of amending that at that given time.
So how about if we take time to think about this? And I mean, it's not, we don't have, it's not something you have to do in just right this second, but if we think about it and then come back or maybe in January when we have our workshop, we can talk about it again, or you can email me and let me know what you think. And if we have consensus, great. Maybe we just need time to think about it and
Well, I think the problem is that our first workshop in January is the 19th. Do we want to have a workshop earlier in January than the 19th? I mean,
There was a discussion, and I don't know that the board made a decision, but there was a discussion to have a brief workshop before the meeting on, I believe it's January 7th, the Thursday, the first
Yeah.
meeting, to shortlist candidates for the general counsel position.
Right.
So,
so we will have a workshop on the 7th
Yes.
before the meeting. And the time to be determined. If there's more that we need to talk about than just that issue, we'll start it earlier than that. But so that it doesn't run for 12 hours, we won't start it before noon, for sure. So
we have a workshop on the 7th, and we have a board meeting on the 8th, is that correct, Kathy? Or is it also on the 7th? It's also on the 7th, so it's the same day.
Same day.
And then what's the next board meeting after that?
the 19th.
19th,
I
and there's
see.
a workshop.
That's a good start. See how we do.
And so then what we do is, do we want to have the, we'd have to look to see what we want on the workshop in February. But I'd just like to pencil in the first Tuesday of the month, a 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock or 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock workshop. A 3-hour workshop somewhere in there, and if it has to be longer, it's longer, but we will not vote on anything that we discuss in that workshop that day. And if there's things that we can't get to in that workshop on the first Tuesday, we can put them on the agenda for the third Tuesday. Because we'll be in the process of making that agenda. But let's make sure that when we set up these workshops, that we give enough time. I mean, some of these 15-minute items took more than 15 minutes, and we're running a little late now.
Yes.
But, maybe item 7 here, we can take and put that on another time, or we can discuss it now. But right now, as the chair, we will be setting a workshop on January 7th, and potentially February 2nd in the afternoon workshops.
So right now, then, we have, on January 7th, we have a workshop and a board meeting, and then on the 19th, we have a board meeting
And a work.
and a workshop.
Yep.
Okay? So let's start.
Oh, Tom, did you have something else to say on the?
Yeah, so let me start by saying I will vote for whatever you all want. All I wanted was, because what I'm hearing of 2 workshops and 2 board meetings on the same day is just double what we're doing, which is broken, in my opinion. So, but if that's what everyone wants, I'm for that. I think that maybe as an alternative, scheduling one workshop that is on a separate day that gives us however much time it takes to just talk and relax, and then always be at your best at every single board meeting might be the alternative. And that way we're flexible to just, and if we need 2 hours at that workshop, or we need 22 hours at that workshop, then that's how it gets worked out. So that might be the middle ground. But I will vote for whatever everybody wants to do.
Yeah, and we have to be cognizant of the superintendent's schedules too. But so right now, we don't have to change our board meeting times because we can cancel them going forward. And we've added the workshop for January 7th, but we haven't had the time yet, but we will do that when we set up the agenda for the 7th. The superintendent and I will talk about what we need to, if there's other things on that workshop agenda. Because that is something, it's the agenda gets set by the superintendent with input from the board chair. And that the times get set on that also, working with the superintendent, the board chair, and our assistant. Designation, can we move on? Or it's 12:15, and we've got a lunch break we need to.
What's that?
Spend another half hour on this.
Another half hour on this. Do you, I think, well, number 7, I mean, I did want to put something out there on number 7, just so I have some sort of direction here, just real quickly. Designation of school facilities, naming school facilities. And I know we have policy in place for naming a new school. There's a policy that I received from Operations, and it talks about the whole process when we open up a new school and creating a committee and naming a school and so on and so forth. Couldn't necessarily find a process for naming a building, so to speak. And I know we've done it in the past. And for what I understand, in the past, there hasn't been as much discussion. I know just recently, with having a couple of new buildings that we're putting together, remodeling, the Performing Arts Center over at Booker, and then also the Black Box Theater over at Booker. I think there's some other buildings that we're working on as well. But I wanted to put it out there as far as I need some direction on this. When we have a situation where we're going to name a building for whatever reason, and there are multiple names that come to the table, would you rather have a process, or would you rather have the board chair bring an item to the board meeting for a vote as a new business topic? Because our policy is such that we can, the board chair can tell the superintendent, look, we need to put this on for a discussion and a vote. And then at the same time, if the board chair doesn't, but there's an item out there, then the whole board in a workshop situation needs to give the superintendent a nod as far as we would all like to have this item on the board agenda. And so I guess what I need to know is if we know of a certain name that we want to place on a building possibly, or someone has brought that up, and we want to bring that to a new business item for a vote, just like that, or do we want to back off and say, wait, we have multiple names, we need to, and we have multiple buildings, we need to have more of a process. And the direction is to go the process direction, then I can create something, because we don't have one for naming buildings, and I can create a process that then you would like and approve and so on and so forth, and we can move that direction. So that's where I'm at. I just didn't know if you want me to put something on the agenda to vote for, or create a process that we can then use as we move forward.
What we have done on new schools, there's been a committee of parents and staff members and whatnot that get together.
Yes.
And they bring suggestions forward, and with the, like, I think Lamarck and Cranberry, sometimes it's often with the streets, or they try to come up with names, but it's the school and the parents that come up with naming a school.
Right.
And I know we were looking at renaming the field at Sarasota High. Did we do that? I think we did. That came before the board. Do any of these schools take buildings themselves that they turn around and they name, or does?
Well, it's my understanding that there are fields, there are buildings that have names on them. When I inquired about the process, it was, well, everybody knew Jim Jones was going to be, his name was going to be on that field, because that's just, the whole community was just behind that 100%. But when you have a situation where there might be multiple names and possibly multiple buildings at a particular site, that's where you kind of could run into some issues if you don't have a true process. Unless, like I said, we just want to put it on there and the board votes, and it is what it is.
Well, I don't know where that process came from before when they named the elementary schools. We haven't named any high schools since I've been here.
Here's the process on naming a school. You don't have that yet.
Well, it's.
Well, the board has a policy. It's policy 8.55. That's the designation of school facilities. That's, as Dr. Asplin was saying, that's when you build a new school. And that's what we've gone through with Lamarck and Atwater and others, Tatum Ridge. And it's, as I think the superintendent stated, or one of the board members stated, that a committee is set up of stakeholders at the school, the potential staff, the potential parents, et cetera, and they bring a recommendation to the board. That's for a whole school. With regard to specific places within a school, the most recent one I can think of, and I may be forgetting some, was the Eddie Howell gym at Sarasota High School. And I believe that came up kind of organically from Sarasota, the Sarasota High School community, and they brought that to the board, and the board approved it. The other way that I'm aware of that names have been put on facilities within schools is through donations. The one that I can think of, and there may be others, but the one I can think of is the Media Center at Philippi Shores, which was named after the Swift family. And that was both in recognition of the Swift family and pursuant to a donation that had been made to the Education Foundation. So I think, because I know Dr. Asplund has asked me, as he's new, saying, what have you all done in the past? And those are the two kind of mechanisms that I've been able to share with him that I remember. Others may remember other ones. But, one came up from kind of in a memorial fashion almost from the school. Another came through the Education Foundation. But I don't know that we have a particular policy other than 8.55, which is really, you just built a new school, now put a name on it.
Bridget?
Thank you. So I'll be as brief as possible. I do think it would be prudent to create a process, no matter what it is that we're talking about, and I think that's just to hear from the variety of stakeholders at the school site or at the facility site, perhaps. I think it determines on where it is, but and that way recommendations can be brought forward, and the board can make a final decision on it. I know that Mrs. White and I had talked about it during the Eddie Howell one, and I know that was traditionally something that we hadn't done, but as Mr. Hardy indicated, that there was a unanimous cry for his to be named after the coach in recognition and honor of him. But I can foresee other sites where there could be a multitude of different thoughts of the value of naming something after any individual or street name. And so perhaps it would be a cleaner process, a cleaner way, an approach that we do actually have a process that's followed. That would be my recommendation.
Jane?
Well, let me just say that our process is a lot cleaner than Hillsborough County. And if any of you have read anything about what Hillsborough County has done in naming schools and buildings, it's been a bit messy in the last couple of years. But I know that Riverview would like to name their football field and their track, and they're looking at doing that in the next year, I think. And they had talked to me about that. But in the fall, before Caroline Zucker left the board, I had talked with Rachel Shelley and the head of the Visual and Performing Arts Center at Booker about doing something around the renovation of Booker's Performing Arts Center to name something in honor of Caroline Zucker. Caroline Zucker spent 22 years giving her heart and soul to this community and the arts. And she spent a lot of that time working at Booker and participating and attending events. She did have 2 grandchildren who have gone to school there, and we all know about grandchildren and how we spend time with those schools where they're participating, and we bring that to with us to this board chamber. But Caroline has done a lot to make sure that that renovation has gone forward. She has been a bright, shining star in terms of always going the extra mile here in the district, as she has been on the board for 22 years. And I thought that that would be an exceptional way that we could highlight her many accomplishments that she's made to this board. So we talked about it in the fall. We talked about bringing it forward, but decided it was better to bring it forward after she had retired. By the way, she tells me that her retirement is going well, surprisingly. She has sort of come down and gotten a lot more calm, which is probably a good thing. But you know, in that essence, I would really like to see us, and I think Dr. Shelley and other people at Booker are in concurrence, I would like to see us designate the Black Box Theater as Caroline's Black Box Theater. And I would like for us to go about approving that and having that done. We know it's not out of the ground and will not be for a couple of years, but I would like to see us do that in her honor and for all the good deeds and all the good work that she has done for this district. I don't know of anything that we normally name after anyone that I can think of, other than usually it's around athletics for the most part. I know there's some consensus about naming the Performing Arts Center after the Watts family and some other things, and I'm fine with that. But I think this would be a very nice tribute to a woman who has given a lot of her life to the betterment of Sarasota County Schools. Karen?
I'm a strong advocate that we have a public process with transparency. I don't have a preference as to who it's named after, and I'm not opposed to Caroline Zucker. I am feel strongly that our community needs to be involved, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be a process. We are talking about taxpayer dollars, and I think having their input is a very good thing to do when we're talking about any dollars being spent. The piece of getting contributions, I know that as a principal at Sarasota Middle School, it was through the Education Foundation, and similar to what Mr. Hardy referenced at Philippi Shores, we received a substantial amount of money in contribution, which was of great benefit to us in fulfilling our needs with curriculum and doing great things for students. So I hesitate to eliminate options and let a process take us where we involve everyone.
I think the naming process that's been brought forward is probably a good one. I think Caroline could actually, the significant contribution. Got to put this on. I think the process is good, and I think it's probably going to use this on this one because we don't want to get into. It's turned on. It turned off a couple of times. I think the process that we're looking at is a good one. I think when we look at the policy, it says that someone who has given a significant contribution to our county, or I would even say school district, county, state, or nation, because what we don't want to do is turn around and be naming all these buildings after different people, or have the board or board member fight for funding and decide that, oh, we're going to put that name on that building because they were the biggest fighter for it. But I think when we look at the years of service that Caroline has given to the district, I think she meets that criteria for significant contribution. I think that we should let the process go and have Dr. Shelley meet with the committees, have her set up the committee and put it through the process to have that transparency and bring it forward. But I don't think it should be, naming buildings and stuff shouldn't be done lightly. There should be a process, and we should go through that. And I would like to see us honor Caroline in such a way, but I think it should come from our school.
I agree. Thank you.
So I
Well,
think
we can have comments or we can have lunch. What do you want to do?
Yeah, all right.
Madam Chair, before you
Oh, no.
recess, I would just like to ask the board to recess when you're finished with this part of the agenda so that we can have a litigation meeting in the case of Paradise versus School Board, and a separate one in the case of Kenny versus School Board, so that I can get the board's input and direction with regard to those cases. Present at those meetings will be the 5 board members, myself, the superintendent, and of course the court reporter. When those, I believe you're scheduled to take a lunch recess first. We will do those in room 315 beginning at 1:30, and then we will come back to this room and adjourn the workshop, and then at 3 o'clock commence the board meeting. Thank you.
So we will suspend this, this workshop and have a lunch break, and then reconvene for an executive session, a litigation meeting, sorry, and be back here at 3. Where are we going for lunch? Let's go to hell and back. Let's make sure I turn my